Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the first meeting of the new year of 2011. It's January 4th, and I'd like to call to order the meeting of the Glendale City Council. May we have the roll call, please?
Council members: Draymond.
Here.
Friedman.
Here.
Quintero.
Here.
Weaver. Here. Mayor Najarian.
Here. Mr. Draymond, would you lead us in the flag salute, please?
I certainly will. Would you all please stand? Place your right hand over your heart and join me in renewing our pledge to the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Please remain standing for the invocation. As the calendar turns to 2011 and we face challenges, some old and some new, let us pray for the guidance, wisdom, and patience to see us through this coming year. Mahatma Gandhi once said in one of my most admired quotes that the best way to find yourself is to lose yourself in the service of others. As this council deliberates and staff carries out their duties and the public provides their feedback and input into the governance of our city, we pray that we undertake the tasks assigned to each of us with the purpose of serving others and not just ourselves or our spheres of influence. Let us pray for the safety of our sons and daughters who continue to serve in our armed forces. Let us never forget and continue to pray for their families as well. May we be blessed with prosperity, peace, and harmony in this. Amen.
May we have your report?
The agenda for the January 4th, 2011 regular meeting of the Glendale City Council was posted on Thursday, December 30th, 2010 on the bulletin board outside City Hall.
Thank you. Next item.
At 3, presentations and appointments. 3A is the agenda preview for the meetings of January 11th, 2011.
Thank you, Ms. Beers.
Mr. Mayor, members of the City Council, for January 11th, for the Glendale Housing Authority, we have no business agenda items. For the Glendale Redevelopment Agency, at 2:30 that afternoon, we also have no business agenda items. We do have a joint public meeting of the Glendale City Council and the Housing Authority. Director of Community Services and Parks, this is regarding review of guidelines and standards for vetting CDBG funding proposals for social service and capital improvement projects and evaluating qualifications of nonprofit organizations. That evening at 6 p.m. for the Glendale City Council meeting, we have a number of consent items. Director of Community Services and Parks, grant funding from the County of Los Angeles Department of Community and Senior Services. Director of Community Services and Parks, this is a proposed grant application to the County of LA Linkages Program for fiscal year 2011 through 2016. Director of Community Services and Parks, this is regarding a recommendation to approve award of American Recovery and Reinvestment Act funds to Glendale Community College. And again, Director of Community Services and Parks, this is recommendation to approve the award of additional American Recovery and Reinvestment Act funds to the California Manufacturing Technology Consulting Group. General Manager of Glendale Water and Power, this is regarding San Luis Rey Water System Improvements Project. General Manager of Glendale Water and Power, this is regarding the Glorieta Wells chlorination treatment systems. And we have one item under action items, General Manager of Glendale Water and Power. This is regarding proposals received for water rates redesign study for the purpose of examining the current water rate structure, identifying various rate options to reward conservation, implementing new water rates, and assessing Glendale Water and Power operations in conjunction with best practices. That concludes my report, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Next item.
At 3B is the appointment of Mr. Chris K. Garcevanian to the Commission on the Status of Women. This was a nomination of Councilmember Quintero.
I'd like to nominate Chris. He attended Glendale Community College as well as UCLA. Has a very extensive resume that you have in your packets. Board member of the Armenian Council of America, chairman of the Gaidas Youth Organization, board member of the California, Nevada, Hawaii Kiwanis District Foundation, also a district governor from 2005 to 2006. And paragraph that he wrote, what sticks out to me is that he's ready to tackle issues and bring awareness to the bullying in schools, sexual harassment, equal rights, domestic abuse, and ensure all women of Glendale make use of the opportunities available to them in our great city. I'd like to nominate Chris.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Question? We'll take roll.
Councilmembers Draymond.
Yes.
Friedman.
Yes.
Quintero.
Yes.
Weaver. Mayor Najarian.
Yes. Next item, please.
Or is City Council and staff comments?
And it's Mr. Weaver.
I'd just like to make an open comment to the students and the parents of the students that allowed their children to work on the Glendale Rose Float this past year. The press said it was the second year in a row that we didn't win an award. That's really looking at it the negative way. You don't win an award every year on float. Nobody does. Unless you're willing to spend $350,000, then you almost automatically qualify for an award. It's much more than that to the community. We get approximately 30 seconds of airtime, which is probably worth $2 or $3 million if you compare it to other worldwide events. This Rose Parade goes to over 260 countries in the world. Billions of people see it. It's a great way, very cheaply, to advertise the city. This year, as past, I had 572 volunteers on the float. Most of them students from all our local schools and as far away as San Marino, Notre Dame High School, La Canada Flint Bridge, Sacred Heart, and there's more I'm sure that I missed. But I am so proud of the students this year especially because so many came and worked so hard. I only get disappointed, not for myself, but for them, because when they see the float on New Year's Day, they're looking for that award. Doesn't always happen. But I want all of them to know, and I want their parents to know, that I am extremely proud. I got compliments right and left on how well managed the students were. First day, I had over 160 students, all working, sitting there, not playing around, all day long. Staff couldn't believe it. As far as 2 years in a row not winning, I found out some months after 1st of January last year when we did that Eagle, all three of the judges had stated that we had the best Eagle constructed that they'd ever seen in their lives. They still didn't give us a trophy. So they had their own rationale for what they did. I was proud of that more than anyone I think I'd ever done. And we'll be back next year. A number of the students that were new said they will be there next year and work again. I want to say thank you to the students and their parents because we worked under some chilling conditions out there too late in the evening. Mr. Mayor?
Yes, I have one item, Mr. Mayor. I don't know how many people this morning saw the obituary in the Glendale News Press or knew because they had a relationship with Jack and Betty Wagner, who live in Montecito Park area of our city, but who have been very active in our city for many years, and they lost their son Thomas and on December 27th. And the service is actually this evening, but I wanted to acknowledge it and just read a portion of the notice that was in today's paper in the Glendale News Press. It says, Thomas Edward Wagner was born on March 4th, 1959. At 11 months old, this beautiful, bright, happy, and verbal boy contracted back-to-back illnesses that left him with brain damage and which rendered him the special child who spent the rest of his life teaching his family and anyone who knew him about the important things in life. Tom is teaching us about our own faith because he beat us all to heaven, where he is now, whole, healthy, happy, at peace, and most importantly, in the presence of our loving God, who saw him as perfect this whole time. The service, as I said, is this evening at 7 p.m. At St. Bede, the Venerable Catholic Church on Foothill in La Cañada. In any case, I know that all of my colleagues on the dais know the Wagners, and I'm sure many of you do too. Many looking in do, definitely. Our thoughts and prayers are with their family, and just wanted to take the opportunity to make that a part of the record and ask if we could adjourn the meeting in the memory of Thomas Wagner.
I would just like to wish everyone a Happy New Year. We're currently 3 or 4 days into it. And those of you who celebrate Christmas on January 6th, Armenian Orthodox faith, other Eastern Orthodox religions, as well as the Catholic, those of the Catholic faith, celebrated as the Feast of the Epiphany. So that's January 6th. Merry Christmas to all of you who celebrate Christmas on that day. Are there any staff comments? On to the next item.
Item 5 is consent items, including minutes. We have a card submitted to pull 5B. The following are routine and may be acted upon by one motion. Any member of council or the audience requesting separate consideration may do so by making such request before a motion is proposed. Again, we have a request for 5B, and Councilmember Friedman will need to abstain from the minutes of November 23rd, 2010.
Fair motion. Mr. Weaver.
Mr. Mayor, move the consent calendar with the exception of B.
Second.
Roll call, please.
Councilmembers Raymond,
Yes.
Friedman,
With the abstention as noted, yes.
Arrow,
Yes.
Weaver. Durham.
Yes.
Thank you.
5B.
5B is Director of Public Works regarding San Fernando Road Rehabilitation Project, Phase 2, Proposition 1B. At B1 is a motion awarding a construction contract to Sequel Contractors, Inc., in the amount of $3,785,822.35, and a reserve of $380,000 in contingencies, and rejecting all other bids.
I have a card from Marcia Haber-Kameen.
Good evening. Thank you, Mr. Mayor and members of the City Council. Let me start by recognizing that the city must be consistent in enforcing its bid specifications or risk a challenge of favoritism or bias if it specifically waives an error. And that is a direct quote from a letter that my client, Sean Ann, received from your Department of Engineering, and that is also in your packet that I gave you this evening at page 1. Your instructions to bidders at paragraph 16B.2, which is at page 12 of the materials I gave you this evening, define responsive bid as a bid that conforms in all material respects to the bidding requirements and the contract documents. Your bid documents spelled out those areas that the city specified as material, because those documents state a list of, if you make a mistake here, and your bid can be considered non-responsive. And there are certain items, and instructions to bidders, for instance, at paragraph 4B, which is in page 7 of your materials. Instructions to bidders, paragraph 6B at page 8. Instructions to bidders, paragraph 7G at page 9. Instruction to bidders at paragraph 8A, page 9 of your materials. And the bidder's proposal form, which is page 1 of 9, which is at page 2 of your materials. And I've put little yellow arrows and highlighted things so you can see what I'm talking about. All these areas state specifically if you don't do what's listed, your bid can be found non-responsive. So you have identified in your bid documents those items which you consider material, that if somebody makes a mistake, that's an error that you can consider non-responsive. You're not compelled to do so, but you can consider non-responsive. You consider these things important. Now, Sean Ann completed all the areas that these areas required completely. The failure to not have done so would have rendered their bid non-responsive. However, Sean Ann, there are 3 things that Sean Ann did not do, and again, it's listed on that page 1 of the materials that are attached. It didn't Xerox the bid. At the crush of trying to get bids in at the very last minute, it's very difficult to Xerox bids. I'm sure you're familiar with getting last-minute quotes at the very last minute to turn in the bid on time. And not only that, but your city clerk does Xerox the bid documents. The second issue that your engineer has raised was that Shauna did not write the bid amount in words, but your bid documents don't tell the bidders that if you fail to write your bid amount in words, that your bid could be considered non-responsive. The last thing that Shauna failed to do was to, apparently it made a mathematical error in its extensions of the line items, but your engineers were able to figure out what the bid was without any difficulty. And again, this is not an item that is listed as one of those issues which would render a bid non-responsive. Indeed, Excel Paving, which is the third bidder, didn't write the words out and did not do the extensions.
Conclude.
Oh, I'm sorry. I just would like to ask you to take a look at the bid of sequel, because each one of the items on the bid of sequel is one of those items that rendered the bid non-responsive. They didn't fill in page 1 of 29. They gave you, and the last page, let me point that out to you, and then I'll conclude. The last page, which is page 15, which is the questionnaire regarding subcontractors, they answered every single question with a no, creating an irregularity, confusion, and obviously didn't understand the page. And the last thing that you need to be aware of is your bid documents say if you were found to be barred from bidding anywhere in the state, then you must tell them. And they conceded to be, by the County of Orange, to find themselves non-responsible for 5 years. And that's debarment by anybody's definition.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Okay, Mr. Starbird or Mr. Howard, this is a protest to the bid.
Correct.
And there's a procedure, certain sets of procedures that go into effect. Can you...
Mr. Mayor, members of council, this is a protest based upon a determination by staff, supported by General Counsel Public Works, by the way, that the apparent low bidder is a non-responsive, and that bid should be rejected as non-responsive. This is not a protest based upon the qualifications or the responsibility of the bidder. You basically, essentially, have heard the protest. Perhaps you'd like to hear from Ms. Sansoni, General Counsel Public Works. She has reviewed not only, she's very familiar with the bid specifications, our general instructions, specific instructions, as well as a review of the original letter received from the K-Mine firm, and she's prepared to address the issues so that it gives you the opportunity to assess whether you want to award the bid to the second lowest bidder or reject all other bids or award the bid to Shannon.
Okay, I heard two main thrusts of that argument. Number one is that our bid was responsive, and number two, that the winning bidder omitted facts that would make their bid unresponsive.
Mr. Mayor, members of council, I have reviewed the bids, both the lowest bid and the second lowest bid. The lowest bidder, Shannon, had 3 items that were non-responsive, 2 of which are very serious. One is that Ms. K-Mine did state this, that Shannon failed to write out the number of the amount of its bid. Secondly, it failed to add correctly the amount of its bid so that the numerical number was incorrect, leaving us with no idea what the actual bid was intended by Shannon. This, cannot be waived because we don't have a number. Shannon has not reflected a number. That is their actual bid. Third is the failure to provide a photocopy. Seems like a pretty routine thing, should be a minor thing. However, all of the bidders are required to provide photocopies. If they don't, they are not responsive. It might be a small thing. Yes, the city clerk does provide photocopies of the bids for its internal use, but each bidder is required to provide 2 copies. That's where we get into the failure to provide copy is putting itself, Shannon is putting itself in a favored position compared to all the other bidders because they all have to do that. And as Ms. K-Mine correctly pointed out, the bids all have to be compliant And if there's a photocopy that hasn't been done, then the other bidders don't get that advantage. They take longer. They have to take that time before they submit their bids. And that's where it is unfair to the other bidders. Those are the two primary items that we look at for responsiveness: the amount of the bid and whether it was fair. Any waiver of any inconsistencies would be fair to the other bidders. And on both of those items, the Shannon bid is not responsive. Now,
With regard to the sequel?
with regard to
company?
sequel, that is, there are a lot of allegations that were made by Shannon's attorney against sequel. We went into each allegation and checked each alleged inconsistency. I want to bring up the last one first, which is the statement made that sequel was somehow debarred by a city or a county in the state of California. The evidence that was presented to me by Ms. Kamine states that there was a lawsuit, there were allegations made. This was regarding the county of Orange and the airport down in Orange County, John Wayne Airport. And it turns out that a settlement was reached during that lawsuit. The lawsuit never went to trial. And in the settlement, Shannon agreed, or rather Sequel agreed, that they would not bid on any projects for 5 years. And there was also apparently a monetary settlement. There was no allegation or admitting of wrongdoing, and that settlement was made according to Sequel as a business decision in order to stop the litigation from going any further. We find that any of the other alleged inconsistencies in Sequel's bid are very minor, and that everything in Sequel's bid has been answered within the bid. We have not had to go out and ask them any additional questions in order to satisfy ourselves that Sequel's bid is responsive to the call of the bid. Therefore, it's staff's recommendation, and I concur that Sequel be granted this contract. I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Okay, Mr. Quintero.
Well, just to be clear, so in their response to the RFP, they never wrote the total bid amount?
That's correct. It's blank.
It's absent?
There's some scribbling on it, but it's not
But
any
there's not.
words.
And then whatever math they did do, there was a mistake.
That's right, Councilman Quintero, that is correct. That number was incorrect. When you go to add in all of the extended numbers from the unit prices, the city engineer did add those up. It came to a different number, therefore leaving the city with no number that was intended.
Okay. Any other comments or questions? There's no discussion?
Vote 5B,
Second?
5B1.
Roll call, please.
Councilmembers Strayman?
Yes.
Friedman?
Yes.
Carroll?
Yes.
Weaver?
Aye.
and Najarian.
Yes. Move on to the next item.
And just so the record is clear, Mr. Mayor, members of the council, by that vote, you implicitly are finding that the protest of Shannon is rejected.
Next item, please.
Next item is listed as oral communications. Per your policy, the full oral communications will follow after this portion, which is reserved for announcements. And discussion is limited to items not part of this agenda.
And this is a 3-minute portion of oral communications for matters of community interest or announcements. Marilyn Gannell, followed by Mike Perry.
Good evening. It's my pleasure tonight to come before you and introduce, or let them introduce themselves, people on our special committee on the Bully Me Not organization in Glendale. Nairi?
Sure. Hi, everyone, mayors, council members, and staff. And I'm Nairina Habedian from the Board of Education in Glendale. And we have with us a few of our committee members, and happy to report to you tonight that a huge coalition in Glendale has come together to put on a panel that's going to be happening Tuesday evening, which Ms. Ganell will give you the details on. What I wanted to say is that GUSD is just happy to partner and open its doors to of our schools and our professional development center, and also of our boardroom and our staff time in order to be part of this effort, which is a community effort to reduce bullying and to attend to it when it does happen, so that as adults, we are better prepared to address bullying so that we reduce assault, we reduce bullying, and we reduce suicide rates as a result of bullying.
Thank you.
Paula Devine, Chair of the Commission on the Status of Women, and we are proud to join this coalition so that mothers and parents in our community are become aware of bullying, the consequences, and how it can be prevented, and children can be helped and saved. Thank you.
Good evening. I'm Zavin Kazazian with Glendale Centralized Rotary, and we're one of the main drivers of this, so we hope everybody will come and participate, and I thank very much the committee has done a tremendous work, and I also want to thank Glendale Unified School District for their support. Thank you.
Thank you. Then just a couple of other comments that I would like to make. Every day in the United States, approximately 160,000 children do not go to school because they are afraid of bullying. Bullying in the school bus, bullying on the campus, bullying in the classroom, bullying on the sport field, bullying on the walk home. In the old days, when we believed that sticks and stones won't hurt my bones, but names will never hurt me, now we know this is not the case. The names do hurt you. The names do have lasting effects. And the kinds of bullying, physical bullying, emotional bullying, verbal bullying, cyberbullying, this is all a set of reasons why the bullying is critical for us to understand. Many children do not tell their parents that they are being bullied. Why is this? This is not necessarily because they don't have good relationships with their parents. It is because they are afraid that their parents might take action, and that that action might become more deleterious to them. Well, I guess our time is up. I heard the bell. But just in summary, a couple of other little things. We don't want Columbine coming to Glendale. And we don't want children hanging in their parents' closets because they don't see a light at the end of the tunnel. So please, come to our forum, and yes, it is Tuesday the 11th. It's right there on the screen, and it is at the Glendale Unified School District office about 1 minute from here. And about 6:30 p.m., we're going to have a great group of panelists. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mike Perry.
Thank you, Your Honor, Mayor, Hara Najarian, and City Council. I'm president of the Montrose Verdugo City Chamber of Commerce, and I guess the reason I'm here is I've been reorganizing the chamber, and I had a bad cold when you guys put on the agenda to vote for our monument that we built that honoring the veterans from the Vietnam era. We were the first ones in the state, and I believe the country, to have a monument dedicated to Vietnam veterans. And I don't know, I missed the meeting 3 weeks ago when it was unanimously voted to give that over to the Montrose Shopping Park. And I guess I'm just here to say that I hope with that decision that we will still be included in the ceremonies and whatever events, because we are really proud to have that monument in the city of Montrose for our veterans. And I just wished I hadn't had a cold that week and seen that it was on the agenda, and I might have been here to say something for the chamber, though. And other than that, that's all I have to say.
Very much. Mr. Draymond.
With regard to that, I don't know if someone on the dais wants to clarify it, but it was not awarded to the Montrose Shopping Park Association. And I'm not sure that Mike knows that, so he might want to.
Mr. Starber.
Well, at this point, do you want me to clarify this?
Yeah, why don't we clarify what action we
didn't
did.
seem to actually fall under this part of oral communications, but let me quickly note what Mr. Draymond has referenced. The City Council actually authorized that there be, and I'll call it the point organization that is responsible for administering the BID activities in Montrose, be the point organization for administering the memorial. But in that was stressing the need to continue to have the two groups work together as they have in the past on that, on its maintenance, on its programming, on all of the activities surrounding it. But as we recommended to you, we wanted to have one point of contact. So if issues about policy came up, we would know who to turn to, and that would be whatever group was administering the city's BID. At this time, it happens to be the MSPA. But in no way meaning that we'd want to see the two groups not continue to work together on both programming as well as maintenance. Does that help clarify it?
It does. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
I don't have any other cards for this portion of oral communications, so I will close this portion. And let's move on to the next item.
Item 7 is adoption of ordinances, and that's 7A is an ordinance approving the power sales agreement by the city with the Southern California Public Power Authority for the La Paz Solar Tower project. This was offered on December 14th, 2010 by Councilmember Weaver.
You have no cards, Mr. Mayor.
I don't have any cards.
I'll move 7A.
Second.
I will call for the roll, but I do want to mention I forget who I was speaking to, and I was trying to describe this solar tower project. Is there someone from GWP that's familiar with it?
There is. Glenn Steiger, Steve Lins with GWP are here.
There you go. Okay. So I was trying to pay attention when you gave the presentation. A month ago, maybe? 4 weeks ago? 3 weeks ago?
3 weeks ago.
So it's a solar, not using photovoltaic, but the energy of the sun heats up the air, which is then funneled vertically and channeled through a chimney-like device with it, and in it are turbines.
There are turbines inside
that turn. And what is is it ceramic? Is the floor or the?
It's a greenhouse, and Steve, do you know that ceramic?
It is ceramic.
It is ceramic.
Okay. It's a very cutting-edge thermal technology, and I was trying to explain this to someone, and I wasn't giving it the full. I said, well, I think it's ceramic, and no, there's no photovoltaic cells, and it's going to generate a lot of power, and it's the latest rage in sustainable, renewable energy.
Be the tallest structure in the western United States.
How tall?
2,400 feet, I believe it is.
Correct.
Yes.
Mr. Quintero.
They can go to Spain and see the same model that's been there for a number of years, and it's the mirrors that focus on that tower. But what I think is especially important is that even after the sun sets, you're still going to continue to generate electricity.
Yeah, that's one of the advantages of it. And that makes it different from photovoltaics, quite a bit different.
Thank you. I just wanted to clear that, and again, just raise that for the public's attention, because it's a great project that we're going to own a piece of, essentially. Hey, if there's no other comments, roll call, please.
Councilmembers Draymond?
Yes.
Friedman?
Yes.
Farrow?
Yes.
Weaver?
Aye.
Mayor Najarian?
Yes. Move to the next item. Thank you.
At 8, under action items, at 8A is Chief of Police regarding provision of official police tow services, and at 8A1 is a motion providing direction to staff regarding the continuation of official police tow service contracts with existing operators or directing staff to develop a competitive process for the selection of official police tow service operators.
We're going to Captain.
Yes, we're going to newly minted Captain Carl Povolitis.
Congratulations. We used to call you Lieutenant. Now you're Captain.
I'm not used to that just yet.
So we can call him Captain Lieutenant.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of Council. I will try and keep this relatively brief because we are here seeking your direction on how you'd like to proceed with our tow contracts. Just by way of background, obviously the police department does have a need for towing services. We tow cars for a variety of reasons, whether they've been recovered because they've been stolen, whether they've been used as part of a crime, whether they're blocking somebody's driveway, and we don't operate our own tow trucks. And historically, the City of Glendale has used contractors to provide that service to both tow and store the vehicles. We've been through a few RFP processes. The most recent one brings us up to this date. But for the most part, Glendale has always used a district system of assigning tow operators, where historically the city's been divided into 3 primary districts and, if you will, with an overlay district. The 3 primary districts are serviced each by an individual contractor that provides towing services on behalf of the police department within that area, and then the overlay district provides heavy-duty towing. So if we have a tractor-trailer type vehicle, that usually requires some specialized equipment. This district system has worked very well for us. Our current contract has response times of 15 minutes during the day and 30 minutes during the night, and that response time is really essential to the police department because with our minimal level of staffing, it allows us to free our resources up much faster and get them back in the field for their normal activities. Our current contracts are a result of an RFP process that I think a few of you might remember from about 6 years ago. The contracts were for a period of 5 years. They had a 3-year base term and a 2-year extension. That 2-year extension has been exercised, and so those original contracts expired on December 31st of 2010 and have been extended through the end of January temporarily while we seek your direction. Based on that last round of RFPs, the tow contracts were awarded back to our original contractors, though each of them had to make some improvements to their facilities. They have done that, and we have been, as the police department, have been satisfied with the performance of the contractors. However, just one thing to note, everything kind of goes in cycles, but the one thing that has been a trend over the last few years is the overall number of vehicles towed on behalf of the police department has declined about 28% from fiscal year 04-05 through the last fiscal year, and at least looking at the first quarter numbers, that trend appears to be continuing. There could be a couple of reasons for that. Some of that is obviously towing is not our primary business. We tow cars sort of ancillarily as they're evidence or related to other activities that we do in. So as crime trends have gone down, obviously there would be some changes there. And another possible reason for that is there have been some changes in case law as to when police officers can or cannot tow a car. And so that has changed the way we do business. As I said, we're here tonight basically seeking your direction on how you'd like to proceed since the contracts are expiring, and we have presented 3 primary options for your consideration to help spark the creative juices, if you will, and see how we'd like to proceed. One option would be to renew our existing contracts. The contractors, as I've stated before, have provided a satisfactory level of service to the police department, although overall tows have decreased, an extension of those contracts would allow us to continue receiving those services and give each of the contractors a longer period of time to, if you will, amortize their costs and investments in the facility and recoup those costs. A second option is the original RFP, when staff did that work. Drawing the boundary lines is a balancing act between response times on behalf of the police departments and balancing out workload. At that time, the districts were redrawn, and the staff report indicated that the workload was estimated to be approximately on a 40-40-20 basis, with the 2 primary areas in the downtown getting 40% each and the northern area getting about 20% each. That estimate did not come to fruition. The northern area has run 10 to 11%, and the balance has been picked up by the downtown areas, and heavy-duty tows tends to run 1% or less. in any case, although those were estimates, as I said, it's kind of, if you will, a zero-sum process here. But one of the options would be to renew the contracts with the existing contractors and ask us to go back and redraw those boundary lines to see if we can adjust the workload. That's not necessarily an easy undertaking for us, as our computer systems are designed to track criminal activity, not how many cars that we tow. So that would involve a significant investment of staff resources for us in order to do that. The third option that we really have would be to issue a new RFP for tow services and open that up to not only our existing contractors but to outside contractors, and that would be a fully open and competitive process. The last RFP, the standards that were ultimately established required the tow operator to have a facility properly zoned and outfitted either within the city of Glendale or within a 1/4 mile boundary, or within a 1/4 mile of the city limits of Glendale. And so any new entrants would obviously have to have the financial backing to find a properly zoned piece of property, staff it, and run it according to Glendale standards. But those would be the basic three options, and I'm available to answer any questions.
I have some questions, and I'll go to my colleague. When we initially did the RFP, we came up with, I guess, prospective or proposed distribution of vehicles, and that was 40, 40, and 20. A couple questions. Number one, did that in any way guarantee or imply that we would try to meet those particular numbers, or was that just an estimation as to what we felt was coming from each zone? And the numbers that we currently have, you say there's a 28% decrease. Obviously the idea is that the tow operators invest money in facilities and equipment and training and labor and other things like that. They need to rely on a certain stream of income. But aside from the number of tows, which you've measured, do we at all measure the revenue per tow? In other words, you could have a few number of tows, but if those cars sit in your lot at $50, $60 a day, I don't know what they charge. I think it's somewhere around there. Whereas another operator has many tows, but the cars are taken out the next day. Have we done any analysis as to that? Perhaps the individual operators have done that and will present that, but have we looked at that at all, or do we just look at the actual number of vehicles that are coming from each district?
We actually look at the number of vehicles that are coming from each district. We don't go in and do an additional analysis on aging and how many that are set. We really encourage officers to tow vehicles when appropriate. As I said, I humorously say we're not in the business of towing cars, we're in the business of doing law enforcement, and towing cars is sometimes a part of that job. And so that's really where we look at. So we look at the number of tows, and then we look at the revenue that the city receives, per vehicle under certain circumstances.
And those numbers that we put out there in the RFP, the 40, 40, and 20, we generated those percentages. Was that?
So I was a spectator, so I can't speak to the act, but to answer your first question, it was an estimate. The staff report indicated that those were the estimated revenues, or I'm sorry, not estimated revenues, but that would be the estimated workload that was put in the original RFP, and it was an estimate.
And then you said another thing you mentioned was a zero-sum gain if we start recommending adjustments. Is there any way to grow the pot? Are there other types of services that can be added or supplemented to a particular tow operator's repertoire of services that may be an equalizer to what they may perceive as inequities in the distribution?
Because we're in the business of, and what we're talking about here is involuntary tows, we don't, if you will, regulate what a tow operator does for other lines of business, whether that's potentially AAA contracts or other insurance contracts or contracts with other entities such as the Sheriff's Department or CHP or another municipal agency. They are certainly free to pursue those. But I'm a little hesitant to say that we would grow the pot, because ultimately our responsibility is to appropriately and legally tow cars as we uncover criminal activity or a reason to do that. And as I said, when we're towing those cars, I guess you could say we're doing that, if you will, over the objection of the owner. They don't have a choice in the fact that we're towing their car.
The Northern District, the lines pertaining to the Northern District, do they extend down to where? The college, 134, where?
To roughly, it covers the entire northern area of the city. It comes down to Colina, comes down the Wash to Mountain, goes across Mountain in an easterly direction, basically in a state line. So if you will, it covers the Northern District would cover the areas of Camino San Rafael and the upper part of Chevy Chase Canyon.
And does include Glendale College?
Yes.
Does Glendale College have their own tow policy with their own? And let's say there's someone in their garage that needs to be towed for any number of potential violations, or on their campus. Do they come to us and do we arrange that, or do they have their own subcontract with another tow?
I don't know off the top of my head if they have their own subcontractor. Is that if we were conducting activity and the tow is at our request, then we would use one of our contractors.
I don't know whether you can speculate on this, but when we issued the original RFP and put the estimates out of the 40-40-20 split, did the responding companies put their bids in, if you were, and guarantee to do the upgrades on their facilities that they needed to do based on that estimation of revenue?
Unfortunately, I wasn't involved in that, so I can't speak directly to that. In talking to the folks that were involved, some of whom are now retired, I've been told that it was an estimate that they had, drawn the boundaries, expanded the northern district in an attempt to try and balance some of the workload out, and then balance that against the response times. But they told me that it was in fact an estimate of what it was their, if you will, good faith estimate of what they thought the workload would be.
And what was the average investment that these companies had to make in their facilities and in training in order to get this work?
That I think we should let the tow operators answer. I don't have the figures off the top of my head.
And last, let me ask you, if the boundaries were adjusted, would the northern company still be able to cover that large of a territory?
If that was the direction council was going, we'd have to look at the response times. I don't want to set up a scenario where we get something less than a 15-minute response time in the daytime, or if you will, put the wrong incentives into a contract. But ultimately, no matter how we lay them out, if a tow operator agrees to that area, we would expect him to do that. And that would be the one time I'd say we'd be back saying we'd be adjusting boundaries if we found that we were getting less than satisfactory service.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Starbird.
Carl, has this percentage split, is this an average over the 5 years?
Yes.
Okay, so has it changed from year to year? Has the economy had any effect on this? Is this likely to rebound and get back to a level that will be closer to what you'd estimated originally?
I'm going to put the caveat in here that anything I say at this point is a little bit of speculation, but looking at the Ninth Circuit Court decisions that are continuing to come out, I would say it's going to be that I'm not looking at seeing any great rebound in the number of cars that we would be towing. It said the Ninth Circuit is getting more restrictive on when police officers can tow cars rather than less restrictive. I think if we go back, if you all remember, there was a point in time when the California legislature adopted a law that allowed for 30-day impounds for unlicensed drivers and drivers driving on suspended license. That at one point increased the number of tows. That may have now decreased over time.
Raymond.
Carl, right now, aren't the tow operators from the different districts driving over those boundaries anyway in order to accommodate the needs?
For the most part, I believe they're working within their districts. That doesn't
drive up to the line and they just stop. Is that the idea?
We actually do try to dispatch them within their district occasionally. I can't say we're perfect. We're all human beings, and when you're running a dispatch center with lots of things going on, that doesn't mean we don't make an occasional error in where we dispatch them.
I'm not even suggesting an error. What if someone's busy?
Yeah, I mean, if we have a tow operator, which I can't, off the top of my head, I can't roll, but if we have a tow operator that is too busy or can't respond to a call, then we retain the option of calling another tow operator.
And do we maintain any records that show when, let's say, the operator from District 1 has to go to District 2 because they're busy, whether it's taking some inordinate amount of time?
I would have to go back and actually pull some computer records on them. I don't have them available. And as I said, normally the channel that comes through is a lot of times if we miss dispatch one, we'll usually hear about it from a tow operator.
But nothing leaps to mind that's
No,
taken more than 15 minutes to drive from, say, Block Racenna to just south of the college?
No, nothing leaps to mind. And as I said, all the tow operators have performed satisfactorily under the contract. We're not getting complaints that we're having extended ETAs.
Okay, and then the last question I have for now is a follow-up to Councilmember Friedman's question. I think she asked about whether or not you had any idea of whether these tow operators had upgraded their facilities based on the estimates. You answered that, but my question is, do we require upgraded facilities if they're going to be the designated tow operators in these districts?
I can try and answer that in two parts.
Take three.
At this point, with the existing tow operators for any future contract, we don't have any proposed additional upgrades. My recollection is when the last RFP was issued and the original 3 tow operators, they were all required to make certain upgrades to their facilities as a combination of the RFP and I believe at the direction of council.
So then it's fair to say that whether or not they based their upgrades at that time on these estimates, if they wanted to be considered, they had to make these upgrades at that time?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, I do have some cards from the public. Stand by, Captain. We may have some more questions. Sue present, followed by Sam present, Al present.
Good evening. Hi, I'm Susan President. I'm an owner of CV Tow. CV Tow is the operator for District 3, Upper Glendale. In 2005, we had 10% of the city tows. The city said that we were going to be getting 20% of the tows under the new contract. We relied on receiving that 20% that would double our city tows. Therefore, to accommodate the additional 10% in tows we were to receive, we gave up a significant portion of our Auto Club contract, which is the Sunland-Tahunga area, so that we could provide the service expected by the city. We made improvements to our site and helped the landlord pay $250,000 on our improvements. To date, we have not received the 20% of tows. We continue to receive the original 10%. The effect of this is substantial losses, and we cannot amortize expenses. This is a family-owned business by Glendale residents. We've been serving Glendale for 45 years. The effect of all this is to harm a long-lived business and our livelihood, all as a result of our reliance on the city's 40-40-20 assurances. We have satisfactory service to the city, and we have proven that our service meets city goals, even in the extended territory in District 3. We've discussed with the police department the fact that we did not receive the tows we were bargained for, but nothing really happened. We have proven that we can service a further distance because we service the 134 and even towards the 5 freeway for CHP. We urge you to adopt option 2 and to honor the 40-40-20 distribution. I know we've also had to lay off. I've laid off some of my dispatchers. I've had to pick up the slack in that. So I'm well aware of what's coming in, what's going out, and we're just not getting much. And I know there's an area down at Glendale College. You were talking Glendale College. I think we've received maybe 1 call in that area. So I don't know if it is being contracted out somewhere else or if we're not getting the calls. I don't really know, because I would think that that would be an area that something would be happening. But I know it's been slow. I know the economy is down, but you know, if we were getting the 20%, that's pretty much what we're asking for. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Sam, present.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and members of the council. My name is Sam Present, and I also am an owner at Crescenta Valley Tow, and my sisters and I operate Crescenta Valley Tow. We're very proud to serve the Foothill District for 49 and a half years now. We're also very proud to be one of Glendale City's official police tows. In order to be a police tow, it was addressed in here, all three towers had to meet the same exact requirements. We had to have the same amount of trucks that were required. We had to have a facility that was built a certain way, an indoor storage area and such. And we all had a financial investment. One would think that if you had three companies towing for a city, that each of the companies would do 1/3 of the business, or 33%. But that's not the case. 5 years ago, we accepted the contract offer from the city. We signed a contract for 20% of the towing of Glendale. Unfortunately, we've only received 10%. Okay? So while one of the other companies has received 49%, we're receiving 10 and another company is receiving 49, it seems that a balance needs to occur. And all we were asking here tonight is a fair division of the city's tows. Allow us the 20% that we were offered in order to be one of the towers for Glendale. We feel we were promised this, and we would urge you to adopt the option number 2. And we think that this adjustment would be relatively simple. It's not going to take a whole office staff to figure out how to adjust the boundary. You just drop the boundary further down, and you take a second look at it in a few months and see what the percentage of the total amount of tows from Glendale are now coming to us. So we urge you to go with option number 2. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Hal, present, followed by Sheldon Baker.
Good evening, Council. I'm Hal Present. My wife and I are the landlords of the property, and in 2005, we agreed to improve the property so the company could obtain the District 3, which would increase their towing from 10% of the city to 20%. And from our part of it, we looked like we could absorb a rent increase from the company's part. I'm also part of the company. We did all the improvements asked of us. It came to $250,000. So we're proud of our facility. However, the company did not receive the 20% of towing, and they've not been able to pay a rent increase. In fact, we've had to lower the rent because of the current economy. So again, as they stated, we hope you adopt item 2, which would give the city the opportunity to extend us and see how that works, and get the 20% that we bargained for. Thank you.
Thank you. Sheldon Baker.
Good evening. I'm Sheldon Baker, attorney for CV Tow, and I represented CV Tow in the 2005 contract award. The city has had goals for the tow providers, and it set those by resolutions over an extended period of time. Basically, the goals the city had was good service that includes timely removing cars from the scene and allowing reasonable proximity for citizens to recover their cars. At the same time, another goal was to achieve a level of profitability for the tow operators. Those goals are set forth in your agenda report. Based upon all that, the city set 3 service districts and set an allocation of city tows at 40-40-20 for the 3 districts. It also set, as you've heard, the same standards and requirements for the operators, even though the percentage of tows was going to differ. As you have heard, CV Tow had 10% before the award, and they expected to receive 20%. Your report clearly states the division has not been 40-40-20. It's instead 49, 40, and 10. Early on, under the contract, we went to the police to indicate that the 40-40-20 split was not being achieved, since CV Tow was getting only its historic 10%. I want to point out that those meetings occurred before the economy went down. Yes, the economy is down now, but we're counting the number of tows, not what the economy is, the amount of city tows. And there's only 100% you can divide. My client is receiving 10 and not 20%. We were promised early on in the contract that action would be taken to make matters fair. The initial 3-year period of the contract ran, and no changes were made. The contract was extended by 2 years, and no changes were made. Now the 5 years have run. The city reports indicate my client has performed properly, has satisfied all requirements placed on it. The time is here and now to correct the improper balance of tows. There are several ways that this can be corrected. For example, the city does know through their reports where the particular tows come from, and boundaries can be changed to achieve closer to the 40-40-20 split. Another possibility is the city could adopt a rotation schedule. I'm sure there's other alternatives. But again, we point out CV Tow has performed satisfactory. Our client stands ready to assist the city in determining possible alternatives to making the distribution of tows more fair. We simply want it to be fair. We ask for your help and urge you to support option number 2. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. I don't have any other cards on this item. Comments?
I'll go ahead and make my comments. I know that I can't make a decision here tonight. Heard all the questions that have been asked. We don't have the answers. CV Tow has a bigger area than a portion, but also a longer drive for anybody that's going to pick up their cars. That's one factor. Moving boundaries, where's the concentration of the tolls? We move the boundaries. Where would it be? I know that I sat here when we told all the operators they would have to make significant improvements on their sites. I visited at least 2 of them, and I saw extensive improvements they made. I don't know how they penciled that out to recover their costs. If you expected 20, you only got 10, that had to have an effect. Like I said, we don't have the information here tonight. Where I am here tonight is a variation on option 2. That is, extend the contract existing a maximum 6 months, direct staff to go back, get us the information on the questions we've asked that we don't have here tonight. We come back with variations on where we can redraw the lines, whatever. But I reserve the right to go back to option 1 and keep it just as it is. But I can't even say that without knowing. If the operators had 40, now they have 49, what are they going to think if we say we're going to take your areas away to reduce you back to 40? There's going to be complaints on both sides. And I guess the final analysis will be if we say to any of the 3 operators, which I sincerely hope we keep in the city, if we say to them, well, if you can't get what you want, are you going to give up and leave the city? That would be the bottom line. Trying to split the baby 3 ways. We're trying to be fair. Personally, I think they ought to have near the 20%. But I can't sit here tonight and say how you do it and be fair to everybody. So I'd like to see the extension, direct staff, the police to go back. They have all the statistical data.
Okay,
Yeah,
so let's call that the
questions.
Weaver motion to temporarily extend,
I don't know about that, you could call it option 4. I don't know.
well, let's call it the Weaver motion, to temporarily extend the existing contracts
A maximum 6 months.
pending staff's return to us with the information.
Right, all the questions we've asked.
And pending
there might be
our discussion on adjustments or what other,
Or we go
what other,
back to the way it is.
to the existing.
I mean, there's had to be different ways to draw the boundaries.
Okay. All right, thank you. Other input? Ms. Friedman?
I'll second the Weaver motion.
I must be getting in
But-
trouble somewhere.
You know, what's troubling to me and what makes me lean towards option 2 is that it's not just that this company answered an RFP and didn't get the business they expected. They made a sizable investment based on the estimate that the city gave them. And because of that, I do think that if we can adjust these boundaries without sacrificing the service that the police get and without inconveniencing the public, I think that we should make every effort to do that, because they took our estimate in good faith. And it's one thing if it's off a couple of percentages, but it's off a lot, by half. And they had said that they invested $250,000, I think they said, $250,000. That's a huge investment based on us being off on an estimate. And I feel that we have some responsibility for that. And so I would like to have staff go back and do a little bit of that analysis, and let's see if we can't make these boundaries drawn out a little bit more fairly.
Thank you. Mr. Quintero?
I'll second the Friedman alternative motion. No, I agree. I don't think we're quite prepared. I mean, among other things, I would have liked to have seen a map to really focus. I was here when we went through the, I'll call it turmoil, of making this decision, and I visited all 3 of the towing services, or, took a look at them, and they spent quite a bit of money. But we've got 3 great facilities, not only for the police and the evidence that sometimes has to be impounded, but also for the public at large. So I want to try to be fair, and let's see how we can work this out and keep these 3, actually 4 tow operators active, because Sunset Tow does the heavy towing. So I think we're quite ready to make the decision tonight.
Mr. Grayman?
I'm just going to add, I pulled my notes from 5 years ago. Computers are really nice to keep historical data. We had a committee at the time, I guess, that evaluated, and the facilities that they had at that time, there were comments like, I would not send my wife or mother to this place. I grade this place an F. This lot could be a Superfund cleanup site. Don't light up any matches because the whole place will blow up. This is a death trap waiting to happen. I will not set foot in this place again. We made them go out and spend a significant amount of money, stay in business and compete. They've done that. Should be commended for that.
What Mr. Weaver hasn't told you, Mr. Mayor, is those were comments about the City Hall chambers here.
So you get the laugh out of this. Okay.
Well, I guess I will agree with or endorse the Weaver-Friedman-Quintero triplet, I guess we're calling it now.
Option 4.
The humorous note, I imagine people looking in just about now that are listening to the council and speakers talking about counting toes and wonder if they know what we're talking about. But in any case, no, I would endorse that. I think that's a good idea. The questions that you're hearing from the council are pretty much the same questions all the way around, and we don't have the data, or at least I don't have the data anyway, to make a decision on this. But I would also emphasize that whether they were estimates, and we're leaning very heavily as we come to the microphone and say they were estimates, just estimates, but they're estimates that we used when we went out on an RFP. And then it's not like the people, if they wanted to participate, the tow companies, could either spend the $250,000 in the case of the one company or not. If they wanted to be a part of this, they had to do that. So I think we owe all 3 companies and the residents of the city, and our police department, of course, the further due diligence to get the data we need to to make an accurate decision, so, or an equitable decision, let's say. So I would agree with the Weaver motion.
Okay.
You already have a second, so I'm just saying I agree.
Yes, there is a second. I do support that, and I agree with Mr. Quintero. It was turmoil when we opened the whole thing up to the RFP process, and it wasn't very conducive to goodwill and name-calling and everything else. So,
I'm sorry, Mr. Mayor. I would ask the maker of the motion if he would adjust one piece of the phrase, and that is no more than 6 months.
That's what I said, maximum.
Yeah, maximum of 6 months.
is that doable, Captain? 6 months is within the 6-month period. Okay. Let's take roll call then.
Mr. Mayor, members of council, the actual motion before you with the changes that you've made does extend would, if approved, extend the contracts to July 31st, 2011. So it does cap the 6 months at July 31st. Come back earlier than the outside date.
Roll call, please.
Council members Draymond?
Yes.
Friedman?
Yes.
Harrow?
Yes.
Aye.
Mayor Najarian?
Yes.
8B is Director of Community Planning regarding amendments to Glendale Building and Safety Code 2011 at B1's ordinance for introduction, amending specific portions of the California Building Standards Code as Volume 9 Green Building Standards for the Glendale Building and Safety Code 2011.
Mr. Starbird.
I'm going to Hassan Hagani, Director of Community Planning. Hassan.
Thank you, and I'm going to invite Stuart Tom, the building official, to go over the 3 options to go above and beyond the Cal Green Code that you have adopted.
Mr. Mayor, members of the City Council, thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. Stuart Tom, building official. It's been a long road, but I think we're finally getting pretty close. This process started almost a year ago, January 26th of last year. This City Council gave consideration to a number of options, and after considering them, gave staff direction to establish a green building task force and further investigate options and return back. That process did indeed result in the formation of a task force, and over the course of several months, we prepared a report, brought it back to this council, and on October 12th of last year, this council voted unanimously to go with the Cal Green option, but wanted some further items brought back that could be considered to help this city take a leadership role. Simply following Cal Green was not good enough for the city of Glendale. We needed some additional measures. We did that, and we actually came up with 3 different options. Of course, there are 4 options that this council could take by not introducing any ordinance. The action that the city would be taking would be to stay with Cal Green, which has already been adopted, or any of the options that are included in the report could be chosen as well. To facilitate matters, 3 separate ordinances have been prepared, each one corresponding to levels 1, level 2, and level 3. Levels 1, 2, and 3 go in increasing order in terms of additional sustainability features, and they incorporate the key elements that were given to staff to consider. What we did was we checked with other communities to figure out the best ways to codify the goals and objectives that were set by this council, and that's how we came up with levels 1, 2, and 3. I do want to point out that while level 3 has been presented, it's actually including some ideas that are rather bold, let's say, and they deal primarily with strategies involving parking, to discourage the use of larger vehicles, which of course consume more fossil fuels and contribute to greenhouse gases. It was included in your package to be comprehensive and complete, but staff does not recommend adoption of level 3. Both levels 1 and 2, which are higher than Cal Green, are achievable, and they do have varying degrees of additional costs that would be borne by our community when they build, but they seem reasonable. And with that, if you'd like me to go over any of the individual levels, I'd be happy to do so, or I would be happy to answer any questions.
Ms. Friedman.
I have a couple questions. First, in option 2, number 11, it asks that windows and habitable rooms be made larger to
Yes.
allow more ventilation. My only question about that is, and maybe it's more of a question for Mr. Hagani, which is how does that affect design and creative choice? And do you believe that this will be a difficult, will we run into problems with design review? Will we run into problems with architects? Or is this something that's just easily doable?
That's for brand new buildings. It's possible to approach that. I must say that with regard, in our experience with some of the design review board reviews in the past that are a little bit more interested in more traditional design, this may be an issue. So in order to meet this, we may have to introduce new ways of designing buildings that may be much more consistent with modern design. And to that extent, that would require some discussion and going over the reasons for this. And I can tell you that the design review boards are interested in some different types of design. However, it might take a while for us to have that conversation with the community.
My second question is about option 2, number 12, which is about including single-family dwellings over a certain size. This is a proposal that I suggested at the last meeting. I'm glad to see it made it here. My question is, we picked a number is here of 5,000 square feet, and I'm wondering where that number came from. Why 5,000? Why not 4,000? Why not 6,000? So my question is, what is the average size of new houses that are built in Glendale? Do we know that? Because this should be then this should be triggered at some step above that, I would think. Well, I guess that's my question.
Councilmember Friedman, members of the council, I don't know what the average size of a dwelling was, but we did give consideration to different trigger numbers. I can tell you that 5,000 figure number is indeed larger than our typical home that we do see here built from scratch. And that was done intentionally to address the concern that you raised. I asked staff if we had an idea how many homes per year were constructed of that range, 5,000 square feet or larger, and I was told that number is very, very small. You could probably count it on one hand. So it does seem like a reasonable trigger number, and that 5,000 square foot figure was suggested by a number of planners because apparently it matches something else in the zoning code. So there was some rationale, but it was, as you can imagine, it was an arbitrary number that was chosen.
Okay. Because it seems to me that you don't want, of course, just every average house to have to go to this extra step of sustainability, but you want to be capturing enough of the large houses so that you're actually creating some sustainability amongst Glendale's largest houses, which are using more resources than their neighbors. So if there are no houses that are 5,000 square feet or above, this doesn't seem to be the right number. So it would be good would have been good for me to hear how many have been built in the last couple of years so that we have some idea, or how many are proposed.
I apologize. Unfortunately, I didn't anticipate that question, so I don't have that number. When we pursued this particular issue to address holding the larger homes to such a high standard, we did give consideration to exactly what mandating Tier 1 meant. There are no communities that I am aware of in the entire state that are mandating Tier 1 for projects, and it is a high standard. So therefore, when we were considering how large of a home should have to comply with such a large standard, because we and the state is still grappling with exactly what this sustainability impact is going to be, and you need to learn how to walk before you can run, so to speak. And so we chose that number. If it turns out that we find this is a great idea and we want to tone it down to a 4,000 square foot home, 3,000 square foot home, 2,500 square foot home, we will have opportunities every time we adopt the code to go ahead and do that. But to start too low at first and find that we imposed a standard that had a higher burden than we thought on a lot of projects, that would be difficult. We could come back and say we made a mistake and we need to undo that. But in the meantime, those people that we learned we made a mistake would have had to pay a pretty high price.
Okay, Well, you say there's no communities in California that impose Tier 1 on residential properties, but there are communities in California and around the country that have sustainability ordinances for residential. They may be different than Tier 1, but in Glendale, we've required basically no sustainability for residential. And I'm sure that there are communities that have required a much higher standard than us and that have still had successful projects moving forward.
If I may, I can address that. I think Marin County was the first place that started adopting sustainability standards for control growth and have sustainability and growth be attached. And they, I think, did it 4 years ago, and they did this entire general plan and zoning code and building code based on the sustainability and greenhouse effects of new construction. But they did it in a, I think, beyond that, really, there has been very small numbers of jurisdictions that have been experimenting with this. In Marin County, they did this whole plan that they wanted to prevent additional lot splits, and they wanted to focus on all of the new growth to be added to the existing buildings. So their threshold for buildings was a lot larger than 5,000 square feet. So in fact, 5,000 square feet that we're proposing is more conservative and is a lower threshold than they do, because if you push it that far, then we may be actually pushing people to split the lots, and that's one. So we have to play it at both ends. And at the highest construction period, we had only a handful of houses that were going over 5,000 square feet. We tend to be around 3,600 generally.
Mr. Weaver.
I guess you covered it, Mr. Tom, but you did check with other communities and found out everybody has got Cal Green, but you haven't found any others that have gone beyond that to a level 1 like you're proposing here?
No, I'm sorry, I may have been unclear. There are no communities that have adopted Tier 1.
Or Tier 1.
Level 1 that I have proposed here are options that have been picked to address the concerns that were raised by council. We then went to some additional standards that weren't mentioned here, but we thought were good ideas, and that's where we incorporated the 5,000 square foot trigger to boost them all the way to Tier 1.
We did Cal Green statewide.
Correct.
We added Tier 1 on top. Then we told you to go back and look at some additional.
No, our last action, the direction by council, was to adopt Cal Green, which we already have done. So no matter what, we already match the rest of the state. Level 1 are items that were mentioned here that council had
I got
interest
that.
in.
I thought you said tiers in there.
No, level 1 and level 2.
Excuse me. Okay, so level 1 would take us higher than just about any other city in the state?
Correct. And level 2 would take us even higher, and level 3 higher than that.
For myself, I can see going level 1 to test the waters. Like you said, you got to crawl before you walk and walk before you run. I don't know where these costs go. The state doesn't even know what impact this is going to have on the building community and on homeowners or businesses. I think even going level 1, which puts us higher than other cities, we ought to stop at that point, assess over the next 3 years, and decide if we want to go to a level 2. Each one, I'm pretty certain, costs more. It's going to impact the developer, home or otherwise, as you go up, right?
Each level, each package will cost more. It is believed that over the course of the life of the building, the owner will probably recoup all, if not most, if not all of that investment.
Except in today's economy, not that many people building, you put more constraints on them. Cal Green and others, you could impact until we pull out of this slump we're in. That's why I say I'm willing to try level 1, but I won't go any higher than that.
I do have a card. Patrick Masihi. Mr. Masihi.
Mayor Nigerian, members of City Council, I was not planning to talk on this issue today, but I do remember watching GTV6 a few months ago, and I have to commend the words that I heard from Mayor R. Nigerian about the standards set by the state. it is pertinent for this council to really take into consideration that the state takes precedence over any local ordinances that are being passed on building ordinances. The state of California has the Cal Green building ordinances that already are in place, and for us to take extra steps to bring any other obstacles for single-family homeowners or any developer, I think is nonsense. Having the green lifestyle is very important. I live in a single-family home with one of the lowest rates of electrical use and water use because of the things that have been installed in the house, special energy-efficient stuff. And for this city council to add on other obstacles and other permit processes and all kinds of other things that individuals have to go through is absolute nonsense. The state of California takes precedence. And I'm very happy our Nigerian touched on that last time. And before you guys discuss any additional options or obstacles that you want to place in front of homeowners and developers, please take into consideration that there are legal consequences with any additional obstacles placed in front of homeowners and developers. The green lifestyle is the future. I'm very happy a lot of people are adopting it. It's not easy in Glendale to adopt a green lifestyle, thanks to our neighborhood services and other organizations that do everything in their power to stop some of these things. I will touch on that later on today during oral communication. But the issue here is going with the state of California, what they have adopted, and hopefully you will do a thorough legal review of what's in front of you and what you can do and what you cannot do. And once again, thank you, Mr. R. Nigerian, for touching on this issue last time. I do remember watching something on GTV6 a couple of months ago where there was clear comments from our mayor stating that there should be some legal review. The state of California does take precedence with Cal Green ordinances and legal matters. It's a very positive thing, positive move for the city to actually have passed the Cal Green and adopting the Cal Green guidelines. But any additional obstacles and rules, I think, should be thoroughly investigated by the legal department before it's passed. Thank you very much.
Could I respond to that before the card? There, California Department of Housing and Community Development is aware that an exclusion of residential structures over 3 stories was omitted. They admit that was a fault and they're correcting it. Level 1 has that in there because the state is doing it. The other I feel strongly about says buildings shall be solar ready by providing space for future solar installation and future access for solar systems. We're moving more to that area. Why allow more homes to be built that are not going to be able to handle the solar equipment that we may end up one day be mandating or requiring in these communities? So it may cost more, but in the future, if solar is more mandated, how are you going to handle it if the structure isn't there? Those are the main things that I see in level 1. I don't mind a legal challenge or anything, but one, the state has already said is wrong and they're correcting. The other, we talk all the time about solar, so why would we not want to do that? That's my opinion. Go ahead with the next speaker.
Ms. Friedman.
Well, I'm very happy to see this coming back. I think this is important. I'm glad that the state adopted Cal Green, but in my mind that's the minimum, and that cities should be doing more. I mean, you know the state's going to do sort of the minimum of what they need to do. It's statewide, but that doesn't preclude local municipalities from deciding that they want a higher standard, and I fully support the higher standard. And when you look at what's in level 2, and you look at it specifically, I don't find it, I mean, I'm not a builder, but it doesn't sound to me like something that's going to just, stop projects completely or to be that onerous. The first one is that you have to use, for 20% of your paving has to be water permeable. We have huge water issues in the state, and it's time to address it. And the fact that we're not requiring right now water permeable paving surfaces, and not allowing water to percolate into recharge our groundwater, to come up in the summer for plants, is crazy. And this is only asking for 20% to be permeable. The next 2 standards only require that when they install their gas, their furnaces, and their air conditioning, that they're highly rated. That's all. That you can't use inefficient, low-rated, that you have to use sort of the Energy Star high-rated equipment. Then we talked about the light and ventilation, and that the issue with the single-family dwellings of over 5,000 feet. That's all that's in Tier 2. So it's not a giant laundry list. To me, if you're going to build a monster house, a house that's over 5,000 square feet, we should ask and we should demand that those homeowners make that house sustainable, because they use a lot more resources than the house around them. And I'll tell you something, your electric bill and your water bill doesn't just reflect your bill, it reflects the average use in your neighborhood. That's how they're rated. So those houses, by using more air conditioning for their 6,000 square foot house, affect your bill as well. So I think that there is a responsibility there, if you're going to build a giant monster house, to build a house that's responsible to the entire community. In terms of water use, in terms of electricity use, in terms of resource use. You are using resources in the community. So I think that the Tier 2 is very doable. I think that it is really what we should be doing. The state will follow suit over the next several years, but we shouldn't wait. I think we should demand better, and we should be a leader in this area. And I'm really glad to be able to vote on this today, and I support the Tier 2. Thank you.
I am very happy that we're moving forward. That's been mentioned. Some of the, it's the most common sense thing you can think of. A radiant roof barrier shall be installed. What does that mean? They're just low-cost reflective materials, improve the insulating efficiency of roof and ceiling construction, that a roof be solar ready. Nothing wrong with that. 20% of the on-grade residential uncovered parking shall be permeable. That's certainly not expensive. The SEER on the air conditioning units be at 13. Nothing here is of any consequence, but it all makes a lot of sense, because what it means is that all new homes that are built in this city, and hopefully major remodels, not just the newer homes, but major remodels, will fall under these provisions. It's going to be good for the entire community, and it will absolutely be good for the homeowner, without question. It's going to be good for the homeowner. And these are standards that literally the entire world is moving towards, especially Western Europe. There's no reason why we can't do that in Glendale. So I support it 100%, and I'm very happy. I think Stuart, Tom, and the Planning Department has done a good job of putting this together.
I do have another card from Stuart Biles.
Mr. Mayor, if I may just make a quick comment on Councilmember Quintero's comment. These provisions will not affect remodels. That was done intentionally because we still have not figured out how to apply it, what triggers would be involved, and as difficult as it is to figure out what the impact is on new construction, what the impact is on rebuilding a home to get all the ducting and other features in, this is something that nobody in the state has been able to figure out.
Right, that's why I use the term major remodel, not remodel, but major remodel. I mean, in the event, you've seen them, you've certainly processed them, where basically one wall is left standing, or 4 walls, 2x4s, and you basically get a new home. We don't have the ability to impose these standards even on a major remodel.
I would suggest that we handle that as a secondary issue, because the major remodels, now we're falling into the 50% issue, and you know how much of a problem that is just for setbacks. Imagine if we now have a major trigger in which all of the features which compose the building now need to be taken out. There may be a perfectly good air conditioner or furnace that was just installed a couple of years ago, and you want them to take that and throw it into a landfill to put in a new one. There are some huge ramifications on that.
Mr. Biles.
Good evening, council folks. Thank you for letting me speak. I have not read these particular things that you are talking about tonight, but I'm only talking or asking you to be very restrained in how you approach this, because it is, as the previous speaker did say, it's a load on the homeowner who is doing these particular things. I've worked in different localities, and I have seen these new green things coming up, and it is, in my mind, it's a good thing, but only if it's done in a objective and restrained way that you do things. It's a balancing act. I know this, and I practice these things myself in how I approach building and designing. For example, I did a remodel on a 1910 house. I took all the 2x4s out of the section that I was remodeling. I took them home and I built furniture out of them, because those 2x4s were still in fabulous condition, and the straight grain and so forth is you just can't get that nowadays. But it's the balancing act of being able to do things that are green but aren't so onerous, is that it defeats the purpose, and it costs so much to do things. I only say these things because I know from speaking with other contractor friends of mine, some of them simply refuse to do any work in the city of Glendale because of the difficulty of getting a building permit. The Byzantine ways that it takes to do this, they just throw up their hands and walk away. Here's another example, briefly, of where reticence or restraint is necessary on the part of building jurisdictions. In 1994, we had the Northridge earthquake. The building code went from 1 volume this thick to 3 volumes this thick, the next one after that. It was as if the building writers had said all of the houses in the San Fernando Valley fell down in that earthquake, which is patently nonsense. So they have made things. There was plenty of good things in those new codes that were definitely needed, but they went off the deep end, as far as I can see, in requiring certain things. So this is the idea of taking it easy, go slow. I heard one of you gentlemen say, baby steps are good to start with. Maybe you do just level 1. So many things that are already green are already in the state building codes. SEER number 13 is already required. There's Title 24 calcs for your windows and so forth. That's it. Just be restrained, and you don't have to go off the deep end. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
What was your name for the record?
Mr. Biles, Stuart Biles.
I'm sorry.
You just didn't give your name.
I'm sorry, Stuart Biles.
Just a quick comment. First, I want to thank the members of the public who spoke. It's good to hear, your opinions. I do just want to clarify that the higher standard was only triggered by a single-family residence of over 5,000 square feet. This code is aimed at commercial buildings and multifamily housing, not at single-family homes. So the person who's building, even at 3,500, for the higher standard. The higher, yeah. No. No. Read what it says. It says we're required that if they're over 5,000 square feet, they will be required to meet Cal Green Tier 1.
That would include single-family dwellings over 5,000 square feet.
Over 5,000, right. But not a house that's 3,500.
Correct.
Right, so I was just clarifying that. It's not your average residence. It's that small handful of houses that's over 5,000 square feet. So it's not going to affect the person who's building kind of the normal house in Glendale. This is really aimed at monster houses only, if we adopt that second level, and commercial buildings. And multifamily housing, big apartment buildings, that sort of thing.
Well, I was about to speak. I see the city attorney with an excruciating look in his face, so I'm going to just ask, are you okay?
I am. Perhaps Mr. Tom can clarify precisely what level 1, the types of properties that level 1 and level 2, if either are considered, would apply to, number 1. And number 2, while he's coming up doing that, just to point out that while one of the speakers is correct that the adoption of the uniform codes, we are preempted by state law, but it's a limited preemption. It's been very clear by both the state legislation under the Health and Safety Code and the cases that interpret it, is that we can make changes to those codes by justifying them through local climatic, geological, or topographic conditions, and the ordinances before you do just that.
That's correct. Thank you. To answer the question, level 1 would impose additional mandatory features that would apply to all new construction, including small single-family dwellings. And these encompass everything that the council directed at the last meeting.
That's the Cal Green,
No, level 1 is above Cal Green.
the one that we adopted last time.
We already adopted Cal Green. Level 1 now imposes additional standards, and there are 7 of them above Cal Green, and that will apply to all new construction, even small dwellings. Level 2 incorporates as mandatory green building standards all of Level 1 plus items 8 through 12. And all of those except for item number 12, and that's the mandatory full Tier 1 standard that would apply to dwellings over 5,000 square feet. Those also would apply to all new construction, including small dwellings. Only item number 12 within Level 2 would be restricted to new construction of single-family dwellings over 5,000 square feet. And then, as Mr. Howard has indicated, incorporated in this package and actually already prepared in the event that one of these ordinances is introduced, we already have prepared resolutions which comply with California State Health and Safety Code, which make adoption of these mandatory standards acceptable to the state.
Okay. I just have some comments. And this item is only for introduction. There won't be a roll call vote today. But I do think we need to go slow on this. Let's put this in perspective. Cal Green are the standards passed by the California State Legislature. It would not be unfair to describe the legislature as currently made up as being very progressive. You know what I'm talking about. I think it's clear as to where the California legislature is and has been in the past few years. What we're saying is we're going to go even past the California legislature's recommendations for sustainability and renewable a laundry list of renewable components in a construction. I think that's a problem. I think it's also a problem by setting Glendale apart by creating different standards of construction and permitting and inspection. We are going to drive builders further and further away from Glendale. And what does that mean for the average consumer? That means that there's going to be fewer and fewer tradesmen and contractors willing to go through the Glendale system. And what that means is they're going to be able to charge higher and higher fees for their efforts and for their construction efforts. Now, unless we're going to make these voluntary and put them as incentives, should you meet anything in level 1, we can reduce your permit fees, or we can reduce your inspection fees, or we can give you rebates above and beyond what already exists with GWP. I am strongly opposed at this time to adding these on to a Cal Green system that we haven't seen in operation yet. Cal Green just came into effect a few days ago. It is a mistake to just jump on top and not fully assess the impact of the Cal Green efforts. And that's just my opinion on this. I mean, maybe in the future, if Cal Green is widely accepted and loved and everyone's going along fine with it, I would not be opposed to looking at imposing a higher level 1. I'm not even conceding accepting level 1 at this point, but to just do it at this point before the full impact of Cal Green is felt, I think we're rushing this along, and there's no need to do that, especially in this economy. It's not like people are knocking down the permit department's door for new construction, and especially in this city where there are very few available new construction sites. That's just where I am on this. Mr. Weaver.
Mr. Tom, there's nothing that says we have to accept everything within level 1 or 2, right? You grouped them, but
There isn't. If you chose to give us additional direction, we could come back and craft something that cherry-picked among those.
Well, what I'm getting at, Mr. Mayor, the first one, which the state already admits they omitted, by passing it or adding that, we're just doing what the state is going to do anyhow. We're just going to be a little ahead of the state. But they recognize the omission. Only other one is because I've heard the talk from this council for a long time about solar. New dwellings are being built, they ought to allow for additional solar in the future. Those are the only two I feel real strongly about. Yeah, there'll be a little more cost in structure, whatever, to make it solar compatible in the future, but that is the wave of the future.
You're talking about item 7.
Excuse me?
You're referring to item 7 then? The
6.
building shall be solar ready.
7, yeah. 1 and 7. 1 because the state's going to do it, and 7 because we've done a lot of talking about solar. You can leave the others off for now.
Mr. Draymond.
I would like to see something back that gives us, or when this comes back, that gives us the option to pick some of these items. I fully agree that we should be looking at structures, new structures over 5,000 square feet and over. I'm really not interested in moving something along at this time that captures small dwellings. But I think 5,000 square feet and larger is the place to start. I would like to see item 12 incorporated. I'd like to see item 6 incorporated. There may be others, but it's something to do with the grouping of this, the grouping of these that makes it hard for me to vote on this, or hard for me to support one specific level tier. I see items I like, but if the only way I can get to item 12 is by adopting or adding to Cal Green in such a way that it incorporates all of this and places that burden on small dwellings as well, I can't go there. And I want to go there. So I'd like to be able to get to some of these item numbers. And I see heads swimming out in the chamber there because we're talking about levels and tiers and items. And so...
Mr. Howard, how can we accomplish what Mr. Draymond's talking about, and Mr. Weaver as well?
I've got additional before he speaks, if I could. It's namely, is it possible, Mr. Tom, like it says, if air conditioning, cooling equipment is installed within a residential building, it shall have a seasonal energy efficiency ratio higher than 13.0 and an energy efficiency ratio of at least 11.5. Is there any way to quantify those within a range of dollars? I mean, if you're going from what we have to one like that, are you talking about an air conditioning unit that might cost $500 more, $1,000 more? Anyway, that's just an example. Is there a way to quantify some of those?
Unfortunately, there's not. Once equipment gets into the high efficiency range, depending on different makes and models and how well they're built, even equipment within a high efficiency range can vary dramatically in cost.
Well, considering we don't have it now, we have Cal Green, and we go to this, what's this incremental step up beginning? Are we going to look on an average of $500 more to a house, or not within the range of equipment?
I understand.
But to get from what we have now to that range.
I understand. Folks throughout the state have been trying to put a number on how much this is going to cost.
Okay.
They don't even know how much the mandatory Cal Green standard is going to cost. These additional ones, I couldn't even guess.
Okay, thank you.
So Mr. Howard, if, you know, obviously I think there's a interest in introducing all or part of these ordinances, these proposed levels. How can we do that where there's some flexibility at the next meeting to pick and choose items from within?
Frankly, my recommendation would be that you continue this matter so you have the opportunity to go through it, as Councilmember Draymond indicated, and kind of pick and choose and give staff further either give staff further direction or introduce the ordinance with those areas or the I'll call them categories in that ordinance is introduced. Otherwise, I think it's going to become somewhat problematic. You're going to be back at the same position, whether it's a week from now or 2 weeks from now, as you are today.
Ask a question. Question of Mr. Tom. Did these recommendations and these groupings of recommendations, were they developed by our Green Building Task Force or in conjunction with them?
These combinations of items were put together basically by talking to all of the different code enforcement agencies to figure out what the best package would be. Just as the five of you have not been able to figure out which ones you all agree on, we couldn't agree on everything. And in fact, as I recall, when the task force did get together, there were only, I could probably count them on one hand, items that there was general support of. So the task force did not do these groupings. Staff did.
Mr. Draymond, then Mr.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'd like to hear what Mr. Hagani has. I know that my colleagues also want to move this along as quickly as possible in terms of getting this rolling for city. My problem with this is that there are items I agree with, certain items that I would like to see attached to these projects that are over 5,000 square feet or over. But I'm not seeing an avenue to get there. I want to support this, but I don't want to capture small dwellings in the process. In order to repackage these or recategorize these, is it out of the question to say that we do what we've done many, many times before, and that is schedule a study session so that we can sort of get on the same page with where we see the policy going, and then, or if that is too time-consuming or cumbersome, then can we continue this so that we can have a chance to speak with staff and find out how we can categorize these. The items that Mr. Quintero mentioned, for example, are items I would want to support, but I'd want to support them on projects that are 5,000 square feet and larger. The items that Councilmember Friedman read are also ones I would support, but I'd support them on the size projects you were discussing. I don't know how to get there without also incorporating everything else.
Maybe I suggest another way. We've done this in the past, too. Maybe we don't do it tonight, but we go to item number 1. Go down through the 5 of us, see how many want number 1. Work our way up through 12. The ones that there's a consensus for go into a new level, whatever you want to call it, or they're just set privately. That would satisfy everybody. Those that want number 12, 3 of us want it, it goes in. Those that want 1, it goes in. The others drop out. Just another way of we've done in the past.
Mr. Hagani.
Well, there is no reason why the way that staff has packaged this should be the way that we follow this. And based on what I'm hearing tonight, I'm hearing a concern for residential single-family homes that are under 5,000 square feet being, at this point, subject to anything beyond Cal Green. I'm hearing definitely there's that concern. And then I hear varied points of which pieces of these, if you were to even put the threshold for residential single-family homes over 5,000 square feet and all multifamily homes and commercial properties that are new, that would be one way to start the baseline. And if you'd like to cherry-pick any of the pieces, we could come back and come up with a new version that has a combination of what we think we have heard the council is, among the different council members, is willing to support, and then at that point you could cherry pick and cross out whatever you don't want to include. But I do definitely hear that anything under 5,000 square feet as a single-family residential home seems to be a bit of a problem here.
Well,
not for
me.
Not for everybody. That's not. wouldn't say that's the consensus.
And some of these, if you look at them individually, things like using water permeable paving, that's not. You can't tell me that that's a huge impact financially over non-permeable. Maybe some small impact. I don't know. But even the staff report says it may have some ramifications. So If the idea is to not burden someone who's building a 1,500 square foot house, let's be sure we're really burdening them with these.
The solar, number 7, it says solar ready, not solar panels, but just having it ready. It's, well, whatever. 13 seers on an air conditioner, that's really become the standard. So if we're not going to handle it tonight, then let's come back and we'll pick and choose. But, I just have to laugh every time I hear, whether at the podium or at the dais, that somehow, oh no, this is the end of building in Glendale as we know it. Give me a break. As soon as the banks start loaning money, they're going to start building in Glendale again.
Mr. Mayor,
Would this affect the Broadway Lofts property project, or, not to raise any...
Any project that has been approved under the current code, and nothing will be affected until this is in effect. After you adopt it, I think 30 days later, when the ordinance is in effect, then any new project that comes for building permits under that will be.
Just for an example, you say that people won't be building. There was a developer that came in and said under your current restrictions and requirements, this is the absolute bare minimum I can do, and we gave them all sorts of concessions and parking and all this. Now we're going to go back to someone who's ready to put the money in and start building and say, oh, by the way, those air conditioning units that were only going to cost you $3,000 a pop are now $5,000, and you're going to have to do more landscaping and get that solar, that big roof area that we looked at is going to have to be solar ready. So I don't think we should discount the issue that it will cause some concern and some delay in people who are ready to build currently.
Let me just remind the mayor that particular project, Broadway Lofts, is building LEED Silver voluntarily, which is a higher standard than this, and that's why they got those variances, because they are incentives that are in our code. If you build LEED Silver, you get these incentives automatically. So they're already beating this standard.
No. LEED Silver is a different standard than Cal Green. LEED gives you points for parking, it gives you points for transportation, transit, and all those other things. LEED and Cal Green are not comparable codes. Am I correct on that? Yes, I am correct. So, I appreciate their efforts to make it LEED, but that's not the Cal Green code. Mr. Draymond.
I'm sorry, Mr. Weaver, I didn't see you.
Yeah, I may be the only dummy up here, but when I read number 2, California energy requirements based on the 2008 energy efficiency standards shall be exceeded by 15%. I haven't the foggiest what that means, and I haven't heard any of us talking about any of these that have those kind of quantities and stuff in higher rating efficiency. We're talking about the ones that are more or less in common sense that we can understand. 5,000 square foot limit, solar ready. We can understand that, but this is technical jargon, and maybe Mr. Stewart understands. So how are we supposed to act on things we don't even understand?
Would a study session be the best way to move things?
Mr. Najarian, I want to put my colleagues at ease.
Good.
I'm talking about my colleagues that I do not see eye to eye with at this moment. I understand the impatience that was Councilmember Quintero expressed, but I also would like to request a little bit of trust on this. My intention is not to scuttle this at all. It's not to delay it, and I think I've been saying that. But I think that if we would indulge each other in the opportunity to be able to understand this material a little better. I have questions now that I didn't have walking in the door. And Dave points to one of them. And the decision I make is going to affect a lot of folks. I want to make sure that I understand. You don't think so?
No, I love study sessions.
Oh, okay.
I think we should do it.
I do too, but and I do too, because we get not only do we get a better picture and we get to ask our questions in a more detailed manner, but the public can sort of watch along. Mm-hmm. I wanted to assure you and Councilmember Quintero that my asking for that was not an attempt to delay this in any way, shape, or form. I may end up at the end of that voting right along with you. I just need to understand if there's a way to repackage some of this so we can incorporate even some of the things that affect smaller dwellings, but not make it a mandatory catch-all at some arbitrary number of square feet, or just say it's going to flip the opposite direction and all construction. But in order to get there, I have to be able to ask a great deal of questions, and some of the questions that are coming to mind now, I didn't have in mind when I walked in the door.
So do we need, if we're going to do that, do we need a motion to continue and to have a study session where the public can come, where we can hear more detail about how all of these will work, costs, whatever?
Actually, builders that can explain all this to us.
Mr. Mayor, members of council, Councilmember Friedman, one option would be to take the matter off calendar with direction to staff to set up to work with your calendars and set up an appropriate study session, whether it be in the afternoon on a Tuesday or a different day, and make sure that we get appropriate notice out to those stakeholders that would have an interest in this.
We could even do better than that. We could schedule a study session within a time frame.
Yes.
So that this doesn't drag on. Get to it quickly, get our answers answered, and maybe even in that time, having heard some of the questions and concerns by the council, perhaps staff can come back with some repackaging that may get us there in the meantime.
So time frame, what sort of time frame can we set, Mr.?
Well, study sessions, the most challenging part of study sessions is usually your calendars. So if you want to set this to come back, study session by the end of February, we'll begin working to get one as quickly as possible.
Better because the budget's looming.
That's right. After February, we'll be in elections and budget. So we'll work hard to get with you and your schedules and have this put together before the end of February. Stewart's looking like a deer in the headlights of an oncoming car.
He's going on vacation.
I don't know what he's going to do.
I will do whatever this council directs me to, of course. If during that interim period trying to schedule a study session, I can get clearer direction which of these items the council is clearly supportive of, and if I can get direction that we either do or do not want them to apply to all dwellings, I will be happy to repackage this and get it back to the council. I think we can all see why most of the state couldn't figure out what to do, and we're just at the mandatory standard.
Mr. Tom, like the one I read, you come back, can you explain that to all of us?
I could. If you would like me to, I would be happy to. I don't think we're at saturation tonight.
I would make that proposal, Mr. Mayor.
And any discussion with Mr. Tom is going to be consistent with the Brown Act and the open meeting law. The way it was characterized might lead the public to the impression that council members might be meeting as a group with Mr. Tom to provide input, and that would potentially be problematic under the Brown Act.
Okay, so there's a motion to continue this matter and to schedule a study session.
I'm sure you want to continue it only because you're going to, if you continue to be to a date certain, my recommendation would be to take this matter off calendar.
And schedule a study session by the end of February.
At the end of February 2011.
Is there a second?
Second.
Did you get that?
Yeah.
Frank? Roll call, please.
Council members Draymond,
Yes.
Friedman,
Yes.
Carroll,
Yes.
Weaver, yes.
Mayor Najarian.
Yes. Next item, please.
At 8C City Attorney regarding presentation of City Attorney Annual Report, C1 is motion to note and file report.
Mr. Howard.
Mr. Mayor, members of council, I have a 45-page PowerPoint describing our first ever annual report, which it'll be my last annual report, it sounds like. No, there is no PowerPoint, but I'm pleased to present what I trust will be an ever-enlarging report on the functions and statistics relating to the information and statistics related to the function of the city attorney's office. In part, it's an attempt to somewhat demystify what the office does. It has basic information about what our mission statement is, our goals, an overview of the office and what we do, our different sections and the like. But it also has additional data and statistics involving number of claims, the handling of claims, how our budget is distributed, litigation cases, kind of a summary of what are some of the major transactional matters that we handle, the number of requests for legal division services and how they're handled and closed, Public Records Act requests, pitches motions, code enforcement, and the like, as well as the members of both the attorney and support staff of the city attorney's office. As time goes on and we prepare these on an annualized basis, we intend to provide additional information as we continue to track and include more and more data in our electronic tracking systems. So what you see here is essentially the first report, which we've been working on now for about 8 months, and the reason it's taken so long to work on it is because we have a whole host of things, as the report notes, that we do, but also with budgetary issues that we have to look at to ensure that we're making and presenting the budget to the City Council on time. We have a lot of things that preempt the working, putting together this report, but I'm very proud of the staff who's worked on this, provided both information and put this together. We're hoping it will be meaningful to the public, that it does provide information about what our office does, how we do it, and the many different things we do. It will be available in hard copy format, as well as being posted online on the city's website in the city attorney's section for access by the public. I'd be happy to answer any questions and provide you with additional information should you desire.
Okay, I have a card from the public. Mr. Weissman? Or Sharon Weissman. I lost your card, but I remember reading
right
it.
here.
It was stolen by the city clerk.
Happy New Year, Mayor Najarian and council and staff. I'm Sharon Weissman from far north Glendale, and I'm speaking as an individual. And I want to thank you for the report on the city's attorney's office. It contains a lot of good information, and I'd like to see it at least annually and maybe even quarterly. As a non-legal professional, I would like to see more context so I can understand it better, particularly comparison figures for other cities in Southern California. That would help residents understand how our city's attorney's office measures up against other similar departments. As I mentioned earlier, in terms of payouts for lawsuit per capita, I think would be a very meaningful issue to see if we need more like preventative legal training in our various departments to see where the lawsuits are being filed against the city and how we can do better that. And the other thing that struck me in reading the report is the relative small percentage of the legal department that goes to code enforcement. And maybe that's why we have so many illegal dwellings and buildings and businesses operating beyond their permits and things, because we're not following through enough. And I know there's always a budgetary problem, but that was what really surprised me is how what a small percentage that was. And thank you for your time this evening.
Thank you. Incorporate some of those thoughts.
Absolutely, good points. As I noted, given the upgrades in the tracking, the more detail that we're looking at, and the like, I think some of those points, for example, the payouts on lawsuits on a per capita basis, while that may or may not be an accurate reflection of something, certainly that kind of statistic will probably be available within the next report period. So certainly some good points to look at. Very
okay. Thank you.
Very thankful. Thank you.
There's no other questions. This is a
motion to open
file. Someone
Move 8C1.
Is there a second?
Second.
Roll call, please.
Council members: Draymond.
Yes.
Friedman.
Yes.
Carroll. Yes. Weaver.
Aye.
Mayor Najarian.
Yes. Next item, please.
Return to oral communications. This is a 5-minute portion. Discussion is limited time. Is not part of this agenda. Each speaker is allowed 5 minutes. Council may question or respond to a speaker, but there will be no debate or decision. And the city manager may refer the matter to the appropriate department for an investigation and report.
Thank you. First speaker is Mary Ann Jennings, followed by Charles Hooker.
My name is Mary Ann Jennings. Good evening, Mr. Mayor and council members. I appreciate this opportunity to tell you how much I appreciate all the hard work you are doing for us. I'm saddened to read in the newspaper recently how some of you are being misjudged, and I just want you to know that as a resident of Glendale and the Spar Heights area, I truly appreciate everything you do for us. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Charles Hooker, followed by Patrick Masihi.
My name is Charles Hooker, lifelong resident of the city of Glendale. What I wanted to know is, the council members, are you going to return all the alleged funds that supposedly the Times paper with the which shows some of our city council people were allegedly receiving back good sums of money for their campaign, and just curious what all is going on, and we don't have another type bill going on in the city of Glendale, I hope. And do you think that maybe 4 out of the 5 members of our city council may take it into consideration to resign? I mean, I'm just curious how much if this is what the Times is reporting, the Glendale reporting is either factual, or if we need to have some people step down. Thank you.
Thank you. Patrick Masihi, followed by Lenore Solis.
Mayor Najarian and members of City Council, I'm here to talk about a couple of issues tonight. First and foremost, I want to thank the city for doing a great job with the Phase 1 of SF Road redevelopment project that I think just finished recently. They're doing some last-minute touch-ups. I saw some trucks out there today. The project started from the freeway all the way to the border of Pacific. It was a very positive project for that area, and San Fernando Road has been ignored for many years, and recently we've seen some positive changes. So kudos to Mr. Zern and his team for putting that together, and we do appreciate it. The second issue that I want to touch on, again, has to do with living the green lifestyle. And sometimes I'm confused because individuals that really want to push us toward the green lifestyle also are individuals that are rejecting artificial turf that can save us millions of gallons of water every year. So the hypocrisy has to stop. If you are for the green lifestyle, I want to see you in an electric car or a hybrid car, and I want to see you having artificial turf in front of your house, just like hundreds of cities in the Southwest have already adopted. We are in a chaparral environment with 14 to 15 inches of rain every year. There are water shortages in the Southwest. The population has grown since the 1970s. And for individuals that are against artificial turf and are on the fence but want this and that, we can save millions and millions of gallons of water every year by having artificial turf. But I'm kind of mesmerized how people like to always say, no artificial turf, but we want you to have this. We want to dictate that you have this. So just to let it, at that point, I'll let it go. But here's the thing about the main issue tonight that I want to talk about, and that is responsible reporting and journalism. We live in a country where we have the right of liberty and pursuit of happiness. When journalists take it upon themselves to bring allegations against certain individuals without any proof, and all we read in the newspaper is, oh, wait, we have some evidence that we want to present. And it's like a soap opera now with our local newspaper. We have to wait because the editor says, just wait and see. Well, where is the documents? Allegations are being thrown left and right. And unfortunately, we do have a group of individuals in this city that like to bring allegations without documented proof, without pictures, without any kind of information. And it's really sad where we are taking part in a witch hunt now. And we're accusing certain council members of this and that. You took money from this individual years ago, and this individual turned out to be this. Well, you know what? Let me ask you this question. If you've ever hired individuals to work around your house, and they have been linked to the drug cartel, are you guilty? Should you turn yourself in because the son of your gardener happened to be a drug dealer? Okay? That's a very important question. Are you guilty of helping somebody being a drug dealer because you paid the dad money to do some gardening for you? I mean, come on. Years ago, if you took money for a campaign donation from an individual or an entity, and they turned out to be a bad seed, it doesn't make you guilty. Was that individual involved in illegal activities back then, and did you know? That is the main question. So for people to actually bring these allegations against certain council members and point the finger and say, oh, you took money from this individual and they turned out to be this. Well, guess what? That happens all the time, because you know what? Years ago, that individual might have not been part of any kind of a scheme of embezzling money from entities or cities. But for anybody in this chamber who is actively pursuing by pointing the finger at individuals and making accusations, I have that question on the table. If you've hired anybody to work around your home and their family members are part of illegal activities, are you guilty of aiding them by paying them money to do work around your home? So let's stop pointing the fingers. Let's see what the evidence is. And I urge our newspaper to come forward with any kind of evidence, documented evidence, that they can show us before they basically throw these allegations around the neighborhood and around the community, divide the community by throwing these allegations out there, and let our city council members do their job as they have been elected to do without having to worry about these individuals that are taking part in these witch hunts. So that's my comment for tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. Lenore Solis, followed by Margaret Hammond.
Good evening. My name is Lenore Solis, a resident of Glendale. Well, I too read the article in the LA Times and the Glendale News Press, and I didn't see anything there where they were making allegations. It just seemed that they were reporting what was going on based on a divorce that's taking place with the founders of ADI. And there were some quotes. Mr. Draymond and Ms. Friedman were quoted. Now, I know sometimes quotes cannot appear accurately, but I think it's important to note that it does appear that, and we knew this before any of this came out in the paper, that we were paying more money per square foot to build these low-income housing units than many people believe we should be paying. And it is reported that we did have staff, 2 members of our staff, who asked the council not to vote in favor of the dollars that were before them because they felt that they were excessive. And we do have a retired employee who states for the record that the council was aware of this information when they made the vote. And so, I mean, we can only take him for his word. And I would urge all retired and current employees, I really hold Mr. Morehouse in high esteem, who was the head over there of our power plant, and he recently retired, because he has been very helpful and earnestly does care about what happens to the city and what happens with our money. He lives here, he's invested here, he's not going to move from here, and I hope we have other employees, current employees, retired employees, employees who really do care about our city, who have information that perhaps they should give to certain individuals who are investigating this matter. You know, we used to have a muckraker at the news press. You know, we all remember Will Rogers, and I was so sad when he was no longer writing for the Glendale News Press, because he was a muckraker and he was, you know, about investigating, and it was funny. And, you know, I always made sure to read the paper the 2 days that he had a column in there. And, you know, we did see the Glendale News Press did not seem to be interested in investigating and looking into, because we did have individuals that did go to the redevelopment meetings and did speak about the dollar amount and did speak about certain issues regarding this developer and these developments, and that information was never pursued. I mean, you know, if we can't, we need to count on our newspaper, and and I agree, nobody should be nobody's a target. Everybody is open for investigation, and all of us should be ready to cooperate in any way that we can. You know, we don't want our city to be under a cloud. We want everyone to know that all of you are cooperating, and everyone in the city wants the information to come out and for this to be over. So we hope that you are going to do whatever each of you individually can and whatever our staff can do to assist in this investigation so that all the information can come out and we can move on, move forward, and do whatever needs to be done. We have elections this year, so we need to get this done. So whatever you can do to move that forward, because we want to make sure that we don't have, if we could have had 15 low-income developments instead of 5 or 6, wouldn't that have been better for our city? Yes. So we want to make, we don't have any money, so we got to make sure that every dollar we spend is spent wisely. And I urge you to move all the meetings in the evening when working class people can attend. When some of us ran for council, we were all saying, oh, we got to move everything after 5 o'clock. Well, now we got a whole bunch of meetings, around 2 o'clock. So we need to really think about moving the meetings at a time that is convenient for the public and not so convenient for staff. We really need to have them at a time when some of us who are working would be able to come after work. So I urge you to please open up the books. Let's get this information out there. Thank you.
Margaret Hammond, followed by Lindsay Soderlund.
Good evening, Your Honor, members of the council, city staff, members of the audience, and people here. My name is Margaret Hammond. This is the way I feel about it. Due to the great reporting by the LA Times reporters, Garrison, Zeniser, and Hickman, we are finally getting information about the high cost of the low-income projects, built as usual in South Glendale. Not only overpriced at $500 per square foot when they could have been built at $200, but also shoddy workmanship and lousy architecture. Built beside the railroad tracks. How would you like to live beside the railroad tracks? Let me tell you, I live up on the hill there in South Glendale, and the whistle blowing in the middle of the night sometimes is very unnerving, let alone if you had to have them blowing right beside your where you're living. Why were the low-income, shoddily built, poorly designed projects built in an area that is considered depressed, and that is against federal guidelines? If I remember, I've been fighting this for 30 years. And I don't know why you couldn't go up on Mountain or Kenneth, knock down one big house up there, you'd have a huge lot, and put them there, instead of always dumping them in the high-density area of Glendale. 40% of the population of Glendale is in that area, and then you keep on building units and projects there. Schools overload, less parkland than the rest of the city, but land cheap, and therefore ADI could make more money. As to the astronomical cost, increasing building costs charged by ADI, I guess their excuse could be that they have to keep supplying city council, etc., with, quote, donations, unquote. 4 top candidates in 2009, according to the LA Times, received $100,000. There must be records of this in the city clerk's office. And $300,000 paid in the last decade. And this is, again, per the LA Times, not per me. I understand that one of the payments was to Bob Yusefian, $36,000. $27,000 to Aaron Nigerian, $23,500 to Quinterio, $16,000 to Laura Friedman. If this is not true, let's clear this up. Let's find out for sure. And all of this done despite the city employee, Mike Fortney, advising strongly to his boss that these projects not be built, especially at what the cost was going to be. Our city manager supposedly looks out for the best interests of the citizens and residents of Glendale. Do you feel that he is doing a good job? Speak up. You know what, citizens? We need you to join us in getting honest and transparent government in our city. Stand up now and be counted, or go on suffering the consequences of the cost of unfair and unjust government by our city staff and elected officials. Thank you.
Thank you. Lindsay Soderlund, followed by Mike Mohill.
My name is Lindsay Soderlund. I've been a Glendale resident for over 40 years. While raising a family, I've also taken time to involve myself with social and political issues ranging from educational propositions to Vietnam veterans. Along the way, I met or interacted with a wide range of public servants and elected officials from the local to the national level. So I feel I have enough experience at this point to at least submit my perspective on the Glendale City Council. It's my personal opinion that this is a group of hard-working, devoted servants of our city. The 5 people sitting in front of us are all good and honorable people. They do their very best to represent the people of the city of Glendale, work their hardest for Glendale citizens, and have accomplished many, many worthwhile things during their tenures. Lately, there have been stories in local papers that mention our city and some of the city council members by name. It is obvious that these newspapers are strictly looking for another headline story like that of the city of Bell. It is also very obvious to me that they've failed. No doubt uncovering a vast conspiracy makes for good buzz and is likely to sell more papers. But in this case, the facts simply didn't add up to some dark underbelly of deceit. It's this simple. Bell was loaded with corruption. Glendale is not. If Glendale's council is filled with anything, it's simply filled with regular, sincere residents hoping to make a positive difference for the city and to do it as honorably as possible. Nevertheless, there are a few in our city whose weekly mission it is to target at least one, if not all, of our 5 sitting council members. During oral communications, they have implied or outright stated that one or all of the 5 members only represent few special interests, that they are in someone's pocket. They've even gone as far as to write that city council members take some kind of voting orders as they receive them on their BlackBerries during city council meetings. It must be nice to have such telepathy to know what's going across someone's BlackBerry. I am sure if they were asked, they would say that they went out, that all they want is for the good of the Glendale. They would claim to be watchdogs of the city. Sadly, I think they're mislabeled themselves. Watchdogs are a good and necessary thing. An effective watchdog offers a community security, knowing that their best interests are being defended. They keep a careful eye on whatever must be protected, and they act aggressively only when there is no other choice. With a good watchdog in place, everyone in a community is safer. Attack dogs are an entirely different matter. They are always in a state of anger, ready and eager to inflict pain as soon as they are within reach. They operate without real rationale, blinded by rage, and acting on their own worst instincts. They are unpredictable, turning their teeth at will with no warning. With an attack dog loose in a community, no one is safe, and everyone stands to suffer either fear or injury. So I ask of those who would seek to simply attack at all times, revisit your real purpose. Constant attack of council members accomplishes less than little. It moves us backwards. It creates an environment that is utterly polluted with mistrust and vile implications. Nothing will slow progress in our city more than this. If you have an issue with a vote, say so. If you understand a perspective that ought to be considered, respectfully present it. If you have hard, factual evidence of an elected official's purposeful misconduct, follow the proper channels to submit it. But if all you wish to do is continue your role as an attack dog, perhaps you should consider a muzzle for the safety of us all. Thank you.
Mike Mohill.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Mike Mohill. I'm the attack dog that they're all talking about. Who else, right? So let's kind of put that up, son, for you, okay? First of all, I'm a long-term resident of here. I'm just not a fly-by-night city council person, okay? Number 2, okay? I became a watchdog because I saw how the city became, and I'm not happy. I come here week after week, and you have people who come out here once in a while, talk through how they feel about me. Good for them. But let them read the facts before they speak up. Okay, I was here this afternoon during the afternoon session. We're these same people who say, I'm for Glendale, and I know what's going on. I didn't see them this afternoon. I spoke 3 different times. As Mr. Weaver would say to me, we must be doing a good job, Mr. Mohill, because nobody here complained about us. I remember one evening you said, gee, nobody came to talk about oral communication. We must be doing a good job, and we're going to pat ourselves on the back. I consider that an embarrassment that you've won the battle of keeping the people silent. Okay, let's go on. I want to first of all thank the Glendale News Press, the LA Times, and Vanguardians. I've always been critical of the Glendale News Press because they had no hard news. Nothing but fluff information, Mr. Raymond. And today, over on the weekend, they finally came out with some information, but I am very proud of them. Miss Melanie Higgin, thank you very much for your article. I also want to thank the Vanguardian and the LA Times staff. Now let's get the facts, okay? Thank you. The TV audience can see this, Lenore. Pay to play, okay? Simple, folks. This is to the audience at home, because council people here don't give a darn. Because in the campaign donations from the year 2009, ADI gave the following people money. Mayor Najarian, you received $27,000. Frank Quintero, $23,500. Laura Freeman, a newcomer who knew nothing, I don't know who the heck she was, she gets $16,000 from these builders and their friends and family. Wow, gee, if I ever ran for office, I want to know your friends.
Mr. Mohill, I'm going to give you some time. Hold on. Are you feeling well?
I have a sore throat.
Okay. I don't want you to get too excited.
Okay, fair enough.
I mean, if you need a few extra seconds.
Okay, fair enough.
You need some water or something?
I would appreciate some water.
We'll get you some.
I ran out of my throat lunch.
Okay, well, just take a breather for a moment.
Okay.
I know you're passionate about this. I want
Thank
you to be here next week as well.
Well, you know, everybody's pointing the finger at me.
Get your information right, because the campaign donations weren't from ADI.
No, we'll respond. This is a brief interlude to get some water, so you're...
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Howard.
Thank you. Yes, Mr. Howard, thank you.
Mr. Howard, I appreciate your concern for my health.
Okay. Let's resume.
Roll the tape. Okay. Mr. Bob Yosefian, my friend, got $33,000 from ADI. It wasn't ADI per se, it was other people working for ADI and their subcontractors. Now, Mr. Yosefian is not on council today, and he's not running for re-election. So good for Mr. Yosefian. You all voted him out. You took him out of the commissions and all that kind of good stuff. I wish you do that same thing with the people who we're talking about right now today. So, approximately $100,000 from ADI and their subsidiaries were given to the city council members in the year 2009. But let's forget about the other special interest in this city. It's called the City for Unions. They gave $34,000 in 2009. That was $15,000 for you, Mr. Najarian, $15,000 for you, Mr. Quintero, and $4,000 for you, Mrs. Friedman. Okay? This is the special interest of the city. I'm not a special interest. I'm just a taxpayer. And I'm looking for good government. But when I see these special interest people acting like whores, pardon my French, I get mad and angry. Because I am a taxpayer. I work hard. I'm on Social Security. There's nobody here speaking for me at council. And then you have the nerve to take money from this illustrious housing developer. $100,000 they gave. And that's just for the city of Glendale. And they also gave throughout the whole state. We know a couple of state officials. What bothers me also is the fact that we had city officials, staff people, union people who I always criticize. They came to you people and said, you know what? This company is no good. Don't trust these people. Don't take their money. They're padding the bills. Instead, they do other things. Then we have on Thank you, Lenore. Then on December the 13th, I came before here, the Housing Council, and I told you about a man by the name of Mr. K. That's Hachik Zagarian. And Mr. Draymond said, you must be talking about Santa Claus. Well, you know, according to the LA Times, he is your good friend, like I had mentioned to you that the afternoon session. Sir, we have trouble in River City. Where there's smoke, there's fire. And there is enough smoke to put a cloud on this city council. I'm asking some people to not run for re-election because of the cloud that you have placed on this council.
Thank you. Thank you. The next speaker is Harry Zavos, followed by Myrna Stanley.
My name's Harry Zavos. I'm a resident of Glendale. I originally had come to speak on the failure as yet to get an answer to my question about the constitutionality of the transfer of water fees from GWP to the general fund. But hearing this conversation, I'll abandon that because I think I have a strong desire to address some of the things that are going on. I must tell you that I communicated with both the LA Times and the news press and the reporters to express my appreciation and my encouragement for the reporting on the ADI story. I did so because I think that represents the best and highest tradition of a news press in a free society and is a raison d'etre for its having First Amendment protection. Now, some people have said here that, for example, accusations were made in that story. I asked the gentleman what accusations. I followed him out. He could tell me none. As I read that story, it quoted one of the councilmen with regard to some remodeling. It quoted the materials in terms of contributions. It quoted subcontractors who had said they hadn't been paid. It indicated that there was an ongoing investigation by the FBI, all which were factual assertions. The public can draw whatever inferences they wish from that, and I agree that reporting has placed a cloud over this council. And whether that cloud will be as more facts come out, as the papers pursue that story, and I would urge those out there who agree that this is the kind of reporting that a free press exists for in a free society, would also express their appreciation to the reporters and to the papers and encourage them to continue. And as they continue and as these governmental investigations proceed, we'll see whether that cloud is replaced with sunshine or whether it's replaced with a tornado. Only time will tell. But to somehow feel that in a democratic society, scrutiny by the press is somehow terrible. To somehow think that people who are critics of the council, and granted, they vary in style. Some are very incendiary in their comments, others are very respectful. But the oxygen of a free society is, in fact, holding members who are elected to represent the public, having them have the public come before them and criticize them. That shouldn't be stifled. It should be encouraged. And look, nobody likes to be criticized. I know I don't. I don't like to be criticized even when what they say is untrue, and maybe even more so if it is true. But that is the oxygen, the lifeblood, the antiseptic of a free society. And to try to discourage people from criticizing their public officials, to try to downgrade investigative reporting by a free press. The First Amendment exists and was made to exist by our founding fathers precisely so that it could engage in this kind of reporting, I think is shameful. And I don't try to decide what is or will not be the facts when this story is completed, but by golly, the process of public criticism and factual reporting by newspapers is something we should not denigrate, but we should elevate and honor.
Myrna Stanley, followed by Albert Yemenian.
Thank you, Mayor Najarian. I get to follow law, Professor. Thanks a heap. My name is Myrna Stanley. I'm a resident of Glendale. And of course we all believe in the free press. I have to tell you, I canceled my longtime subscription, I should say, to the LA Times about 12 years ago because not all but a majority I found of their reporting should have been on the op-ed page. Rather, they weren't reporting, they were giving us their opinions. I want the facts. So as I'm just asking the residents of Glendale to take a deep breath, step back, wait for the facts to come out. The story will evolve over the months. I guarantee you we don't have all the facts. We don't know everything about this. So just wait, and if you wrongfully accuse someone here publicly, then by golly, if you're found to be wrong, you ought to be man or woman enough to come up here and publicly apologize. To preclude doing that, give it a chance. Let's get the whole story and let clear minds prevail. Thank you.
Thank you. Albert Yemenian, followed by Al Hoffman.
Hello, Mayor Najarian and members of the council. First of all, Happy New Year. And I just wanted to say, I sent you guys an email and a couple of weeks ago regarding, yes sir, regarding State Fund's decision to close their Glendale office, along with a few other offices. And I really, really would appreciate, as a matter of fact, I think about more than 500 people would really appreciate from the City Council a resolution asking State Fund to reconsider, especially considering 9 months ago we were told that their lease, they had just signed a lease for 5 years, and now we're being told in 20 months it will be completely vacated. Actually, today I was told as much as 700 people work in that office, in that particular office. And again, I can't say a lot of the people live in Glendale because it is not the cheapest place in the world to live, but people do work here. We have an hour for lunch. We go to Glendale. We try to stick to Glendale because, again, an hour constrained time. Afterwards, they go to the shopping, whether it be Galleria, whether it be Americana, and believe it or not, a lot of people didn't even know that there is a Brown Boulevard of cars. They find these things out, and then they find these little stores. And I gave you the incident where I went into Tres Hermanas by myself, and the lady just looked at me. "Where are your friends?" And I'm like, that struck me because first of all she said, first the DMV, now you guys. And we are a quasi-state agency, meaning that we're not supported by taxpayer money. We are supported by policies that State Fund sells to businesses for workers' compensation. These are attorney jobs, these are adjuster jobs, and these are office assistant jobs. And it really is, it's a symbolic move, I know, but it's a foundation to where we eventually want to get into, maybe, other politicians that would help us out. And I really hope you can do it maybe next week. If I'm asking too much, I apologize. But the sooner the better. And I don't know if they want to fast track this process, but the sooner the better we get into it. And I really appreciate it. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Al Hoffman, followed by David Fortune.
Good evening, Mayor Najarian, council members, staff, and the public. Al Hoffman, resident of Glendale. Well, this has really been an exciting evening to date. I guess I really appreciate the comments of Harry Savos, the point he made about people who are saying, oh, journalism needs to be stopped and they're wrong. Whether or not they're right or wrong, we can't stop people from writing and putting, stating what they believe is right. Now, a lot of us, I'm one of these, I guess, these so-called gadflies that come down here periodically and bring up points that I'm concerned about the city, mostly to do with the finances of the city. I think I've been involved for several years complaining about the high cost of pensions and salaries, and that we needed to focus more on getting contractual help. You could have the whole public works department run by a contractor, but we keep hiring and hiring public servants, civil servants that you hire for life, and now the chickens have come home to roost. We don't have the money to pay the pensions, and it keeps getting denied. And I went to a COPS meeting, a coffee, a few weeks ago, and one of the people in my homeowners introduced me to other people there that he knew that I was the guy that goes to council meeting to speak to the deaf people. And there is this air that the public sees that we come down here. You say, oh, you're tired of hearing Herbert Milano, you're tired of hearing Mike Mohill. They bring these things up, but no action is ever taken. You never respond to them with facts. Herbert Milano puts up facts that he gets out of public records, and they say, oh, it must be all wrong. But I don't see you all putting up facts to discount what he said and prove he was wrong. That's the issue. That's the issue. Is it right or wrong? Now, personal attacks shouldn't happen. I think the news press is doing a great job. They called me, asked me about what I thought about their articles. I felt, yes, what they found out, if it's true, it should be printed. If it isn't true, those who were identified should notify them immediately and say it's not true. That's very simple. Now, there's one issue that bothers me, and this is a week after week thing, and it's the consent items that keep getting approved that involve considerable amount of money. Tonight, it was $4.5 million was approved. Last time I was here, it was around the same amount of money. It'd be interesting to see over a whole year's time how many millions of dollars are approved in the consent items. I don't understand, how are those dollars in there vetted? Who approves them? Who has done the research? What do we know about them? Are there facts there that are really true? Are they really right? A lot of times we get them, they have to add more money to it. But I'm concerned about the amount of money that is weekly approved into the consent items. And sometimes public comes up, they have issues about the finances of it, and yet it never, they always get approved, regardless of what they bring up. I have yet to ever see a council member express concern about the cost that somebody from the public brought up. Are they totally wrong? I don't know. But that's the opinion we get, that we're just discounted, that what we know is nothing worthwhile, and that you know it all. We don't know what goes on in closed session. We don't have privy to that. You do. So my point to all of you is, you know what the real facts are, and you have to be honest with the public and yourselves and let us know exactly of what is going on. Thank you.
Thank you, David Fortune, followed by Gary Cornell.
Good evening. My name is David Fortune. I'm a longtime resident of the city, independent businessman. Isn't democracy wonderful? Free speech, free press. It's hard to follow a guy like Harry Zavos. So let's see what we're talking about here. And I just brought an article from the Times that I reread tonight. What are we talking about? Glendale paid millions to ADI. Millions of dollars. That's what we're talking about. Millions of dollars paid to a corrupt criminal organization. And we read on here, and let me just quote from the paper, so let's see what we're talking about. Glendale's housing manager was blunt with his concerns about giving a prominent developer $12.2 million to build low-income housing near the city's downtown. I strongly recommend not funding this project at anywhere near the level currently being requested, Mike Fortney wrote in an April 2008 letter to his boss. Glendale City Council members awarded the money anyway. Following year, they paid an additional $1.7 million for the project. Must be a hell of a project. Now the firm faces allegations that it defrauded government agencies and may have built potentially unsafe housing for the poor. Now, I don't know who inspected that, whether it was our own building inspectors or we hired other people to inspect it, but there's something wrong there if somebody didn't find all these things that were wrong with this project. Let me read on here. Fortney questioned the quality of ADI's projects, saying they look and feel like low-income housing. We've got council members that go out when we have zoning issues and look at projects. I looked at this house. I looked at everything here, and they come back and say, this is what I found. Nobody ever looked at this? Here, read on. Fortney wrote, if ADI does not like staff's position, he wrote in the same memo, they go to the council and plead their case. Well, why is the council approving this? That people tell us that we have to pay the highest wages to get the best people. We get the best people, supposedly, the staff, they come to the council, and the council says, you know, we don't care what you say. So my suggestion is, let's not hire the best people. Let's not pay them the most money. Let's hire mediocre people. When they come, you can ignore them, and we save some money that way. Let me read on. And the question here is, we've all seen it, savings and loan issue. We've seen it in the federal government. We see it in the state government. And the question that's arisen here is, does money have an influence on representatives' judgment? And I think we'd all have to say it must have some influence. And the question here is raised, if you look at the reporting by the city council members or anybody, and that's on the city clerk's website, you have all these $100 and $250 contributions from members of the city, from residents of the city. Then all of a sudden you get a $500 or $1,000 from somebody in Manhattan Beach or out in Pacoima or wherever. Don't you know where this money's coming from? And don't you maybe have to sit back and question this? So at any rate, we've got the staff saying one thing. We've got the city manager, I think, supporting the staff according to the paper. We've got the city council saying something else. We need somebody to investigate this. The city attorney can't do it. He works for you. City manager has a conflict with what the city council says, because you said that you didn't know about this. Well, if you didn't know about this, what purpose does the staff serve? So at any rate, I think we need an independent agency, aside from all these other investigative agencies, an independent group to sit down, let's determine what the facts are, and whatever they are, then let's go on from there. Thank you for your time.
Gary Cornell, followed by Sharon Weissman.
Yeah, good evening, Mayor, members of the council, city staff, and of course our viewing audience. I read those articles, and it certainly doesn't help the city of Glendale get starting off on a good year. Actually, we're starting off with a bang. I'd like to see, Mayor, on this, you just can't look at something and read it. And I've been in journalism with McGraw-Hill as a construction news reporter for 41 years until I retired in 2005. And sometimes when I look back in my own articles, I wonder, did I write this? So what I would like to ask, Mayor, if you can direct staff or city manager or someone from Mr. Howard's office to have a investigation on this, on the facts here that were presented in the Times article of the 29th and the News Press of the 30th of the four projects. What troubles me most, what I read, and it's hard for me to swallow, because your good name, the reputation, why you're up here, that we overlook something. We're all in this together. We're all in this together here. That the housing manager, it was referred by Mr. Fortune, and it was in the Times article, Mike Fortney, had a letter, I believe it was a letter, that he presented to council or to the city manager regarding his objections on why $12.2 million should not be appropriated. And as I said, it's hard for me to swallow that, because if there is any discretionary information in there that you saw or had possession of, I don't believe you would have approved it. So I would like to see part of that investigation that you will have, Mayor, or the city manager will conduct, or whoever is going to handle it. Look into that facet, because that is the point that troubles me most. Because if that is the case there in that April 2008 letter, we could have stopped it right there. Some recommendations I'd like to see, since this is not going to fade away and it's going to be around for a while, that we streamline this through the city manager's office or through the city attorney. And that this year, hopefully, will be a year that we can listen more attentively. We didn't do that too successfully last year. I was there in November, and I didn't hear one person in favor of the water rate hike, and yet it was approved. And that sometimes, perhaps during this year, we can have an opinion regarding Proposition 18 from the city attorney. Well, we got to tread slowly. We got to get the facts. I hope we can have an independent investigation, Mayor, that you can appoint, so we can get all this out and counter what the LA Times said. Because one opinion from that paper does not make anyone guilty. And I said, we're all in this together. Thank you.
Sharon Weissman, followed by Michael Morgan.
Mayor Najarian, council members and staff, I'm Sharon Weissman from far north Glendale, and I'm speaking as an individual. With the recent advanced development and investments, Pacific Housing Diversified related scandals, we don't need to discuss how campaign contributions can taint elected officials and how guilt by association can damage innocent and guilty alike. One way to both reduce the temptation of graft and the ruination of honest public servants is to remove special interest money from campaigns. Our state voters rejected Proposition 15, the California Fair Elections Act, in June of 2010, but our large neighbor, the City of Los Angeles, has an opportunity on March 8th, 2011, to vote on Measure H, which is based on the same idea that public funding of election campaigns reduces special interest influence. Key provisions include the prohibition of campaign contributions and fundraising by bidders on city contracts that are worth at least $100,000 and subject to elected official approval. Increased disclosure requirements for bidders on city contracts, and banning violators from winning city contracts for up to 4 subsequent years. California Common Cause and the League of Women Voters are main supporters of Measure H. I suggest Glendale could use a similar plan. I urge all interested parties to research Los Angeles Measure H. You can start at www.yesfairelections.org and see what they're talking about in detail. Now is a good time to join the Glendale Burbank League of Women Voters because both cities have municipal elections coming up soon. The League is a nonpartisan group working to provide information to help voters decide on complex issues. They need your help and are providing training for observers in the hopes that many citizens will start attending city council and board and commission meetings and report back to everyone in the community. This well-established group, that is, I'm talking about the League of Women Voters, is in a great position to help locals take charge of their government. You can help them formulate questions for candidate forums coming up. Of interest here is the upcoming April 5th, 2011 election in Glendale. The League of Women Voters puts out a newsletter. It's available online, and I printed a few copies if anybody in the audience wants it. They're applications to join the group available there. And I want to emphasize that this is a nonprofit group and that they are dedicated to providing honest information. And I hope the council and city council members and city staff can concentrate on the city's business now. There's much to be accomplished, and we don't need distractions. I think, as some speakers here have called for resignations, that would be a very irresponsible thing to do. I want you all to finish out your terms and do the people's business. And I'd like to close with a memory from my freshman year at UCLA, way back in 1964. I came out of the Daily Bruin office for a demonstration against the Vietnam War and saw a few other students milling around. I had been the opinion page editor of my high school newspaper, the El Monte Lions Trail, and was taking a journalism class. So I was very happy to see a Los Angeles Times reporter covering the demonstration. My education was really helped along when the Los Angeles Times photographer asked us students to all group together so they could get a picture that looked like a bigger crowd was there. So, despite ownership changes over the years, the paper is still trying to sensationalize events and sell more papers to bring in more advertising dollars. Keep that in mind with all media. Blogs and social network site comments have even less fact-checking and editing than professional publications, and you really need to take everything with a grain of salt. Of course, I agree with the free speech and the right of newspapers to provide information. I want to remind people that that comes with a responsibility. And consider someone like Richard Jewell, that reporting can ruin somebody's life. And thank you again for your time.
Mike Morgan, followed by David Myers.
Well, Mr. Mayor, City Council, persons, Mr. Starboard, staff, my name is Mike Morgan. I'm a 55-year-old resident of the city of Glendale. And I am ethnically Irish, but my dander is a little bit up. I, like Mr. Mohill, am a taxpayer, and I also work, which is one of the reasons why I'm not there at the 2:30 meetings during the week. To Mr. Zavos, it is the right of every citizen to criticize their city councils and their elected officials, but it is also the right of the citizens to praise them when they're doing the correct thing. And no one is asking us to muzzle the Fourth Estate at all. We're asking that the Glendale News Press and the LA Times publishes exactly what is actually the truth rather than innuendo. I am in receipt of an email from Al Hoffman, president of the Glendale Homeowners Association, coordinating council, that you heard earlier. And the reason I'm here is because I am the vice president of the Montrose Verdugo City Spar Heights Homeowners Association, and it was soliciting my opinion on Melanie Hickens' article on low-income housing that Glendale has built, and I might add, to make Glendale's housing affordable to all levels of residents, which is a good thing. It seems tonight it appears to be an us versus them, but we're all citizens of the city of Glendale. We're all asking for the best from all of our council members. And right at this moment, I'd like to say a little bit about that. Mr. Hoffman states that Ms. Hicken would like to solicit my opinion. Well, here it is. 1, since when do reporters need opinions of articles they wrote? But since you've asked, my opinion is that the news press article is incomplete and smells only of innuendo without any substantial facts. I always thought reporters were to report the news, not make or orchestrate it. I asked to Mr. Hoffman, what's the rush? Should not this have been brought before the members of the Glendale Homeowners Coordinating Council at our next meeting on January 10th, rather than at City Council? What's the rush to judgment? No one is asking that the press do stop. Miss Melanie Hickman, we are asked to acknowledge your article, and this is what I do now. Considering the article, you read it one way for some people and you read it another way. The beginning of it says, Glendale's housing manager was blunt in his concerns about giving developer $12.2 million to build low-income housing near the city's downtown. I don't know, the $12.2 million, was it a deal? Was it a good deal? Was it a bad deal? It doesn't say in the article. I strongly recommend not funding this project anywhere near the level currently being requested, Mike Fortney wrote in an April 2008 letter to his boss. Where's the whole email in the letter? There's no context to this. This email tells me nothing, but by innuendo applies that something is wrong, and it states next, Glendale City Council members awarded the money anyway, again, which implies knowing something very ominous. One people reads it one way, we read it another. It says millions of dollars were sent to complete this project. What does that mean? Were we getting a good deal or were we not getting a bad deal? Actually, I thought the building of low-income housing was important for Glendale's needs. It says people were pressured to give to politicians. They risked losing future work with ADI if they said so. They pressured us hard. That has nothing to do with the City Council. This is something that none of them would have known about. I object mostly to the statement, Ms. Hicken. It says details of the federal investigation are unknown, but, and I was always taught that but means that it negates the first statement. Well, if they're unknown, then how do we know what is actually going on? It says subcontractors known to have been subpoenaed each did work on the home of Glendale City Council member John Draymond. It says, and I'm sure they did work for lots of other members of the City Council. So what? I mean, it's like you don't consider people at all when it comes to this thing. This is just, as for Council Member Draymond and all the City Council members, they are good people and do not deserve this incomplete and inaccurate article. This is just one council person, John Draymond, some of the things that he's done in the last 2 years. He's got historic streetlights in Montrose. He's got the wildly popular Montrose Harvest Market. He's got the Rockhaven Purchase, Trader Joe's, the Museum of Neon Art. Since in 2007, when he came onto council, there were no historic districts. Now there are 3, with more applied for. We have open-ended meetings with the design review, and now Montrose is Glendale's official old town. I'd like to end with this saying. It says, Al Hoffman states, hope to see many of you at council meeting next Tuesday. Let's start the new year off demanding transparency in government. Mr. Hoffman, what part of our government is not transparent? You elected them to do a job and criticize them when they do. Thank you very much.
Thank you. David Myers, followed by Patricia Marsh.
Good evening, Mayor Najarian, council members. Happy New Year, everybody. My name is David Myers, and a couple things. The gentleman spoke earlier about the state fund loss of employees, 700. That's going to really hurt. I deal a lot with state fund, and them moving up to Fresno is not going to necessarily impact me, but the loss of 700 jobs around here, that's not anything to be taken lightly. Also, there is a project that the Crescenta Valley Water District is doing on Mills and Pennsylvania. It's a treatment for the drinking water. They're proposing to put I'm not sure if it's temporary. Basically, I'm just asking for this. It is within the city's jurisdiction. I would just like the city to keep an eye on it and make sure that it's done right. Aesthetically pleasing as well. But what's brought us all here this evening, for the most part, is the article on ADI in the news press. There's a lot of information in that article, and it left me with more questions than answers. I was really disappointed that the news press didn't run the whole story. You had to actually go to the LA Times. That really didn't make any sense to me. For the publisher of the news press, Dan Evans, I wish that the whole thing would have been in there. The goals of some people are clearly questionable whenever you're talking about hot-button political topics. And for some people, I'm not sure what their goals are anymore. I know my goals, why I got involved in politics, is to make things better, in my opinion. Now, that's my opinion. Everybody's going to have a little bit different take on what makes their life better. I can only perform as I see or as the people that are around me tell me what's working, what's not working. Mr. Weaver is correct when he says, you're probably doing a good job when nobody's down here. I have a saying, and it's not just mine, is no news is good news. And things are pretty quiet, that's usually a good sign. Things are going smoothly. They're consistent. That's what people like. It's the turmoil that really upsets the balance of everything. I'm not here to be a judge. I'm not here representing anybody, any particular group as a body. Each group can do their own thing. And that's really what free society is all about. I think every one of you up there are completely underpaid, number one, the 5 council members, that is. For the amount of time and effort that you put in, I wouldn't do it, personally. But you do it, and congratulations. I think you're a better person than myself for doing that. And you're going to take heat, you're going to take criticism, you're going to get kicked to the ground. That's politics. It's a dirty word, politics. And I don't know why some people are in such a rush to start the new year with a bang, maybe. It is election season. But that's just politics. Politics as usual. That's about it that I really wanted to say. I think you're all doing a good job. I really do. I think that this city is headed in the right direction, no matter what some people say. We all choose to live here, and we're lucky enough to do that. And I really feel privileged to live in this city. I don't live where I grew up, and I grew up in Los Angeles in the San Fernando Valley. I chose to live here, and it also keeps me here. Thank you.
Patricia Marsh, followed by Mike Lawler.
Good evening, Mayor Najarian, City Council, and staff. My name is Patricia Marsh, a resident of Glendale. An email was sent out this week requesting that members of the Homeowners Council come to speak during oral communications, acknowledging the articles in the LA Times and the news press, and express our views of the matter. I'd like to clarify I'm speaking as a private citizen. My view of the newspaper article is that it lacks substance and evidence of the allegations made. The email also requested that we let city officials know that we are not asleep at the wheel. I would like the writer of the email and city officials know we are not asleep at the wheel and will not stand in silence when seeing a homeowners council using that organization in an inappropriate manner. Thank you.
Thank you. Mike Lawler. Mike will be followed by Bill Weissman.
Mike Lawler, La Crescenta. This council has been the most positive council we've had in years. We just weathered the biggest economic downturn in decades without the layoffs and painful cuts other cities had to make. Thanks to this council, we're in a new era of public participation in the city planning process. And now we benefit from evening design review meetings, better notification of upcoming projects, and story polls for additions. In fact, we've had a complete reform of our city's design review process. Thanks to this council, the Museum of Neon Art is about to open on Brand Boulevard. We have for the first time historic districts in our beautiful neighborhoods in Montrose. And we have historic streetlights, improved landscaping, and new sidewalks. For the first time in decades, the Glendale portion of Foothill Boulevard is getting some long overdue attention. I'm extremely happy with this council, and I won't stand by to see it destroyed by innuendo. To try to pin this ADI thing on the council is a witch hunt, plain and simple, with the goal being to sell newspapers and to indulge the destructive desires of the usual council gadflies.
Bill Weissman.
Hey, good evening, Mr. Mayor, council members, city staff, and the public. My name is Bill Weissman from far north Glendale. I think that, like many people in our community, I'm waiting for all the facts to come out rather than taking any position that's based on rumor, hearsay, innuendo, or guilt by association. I do want to say that there was no taxpayer in this room. Indeed, I don't think there was any taxpayer in this city who was in favor of having their hard-earned tax dollars go into the pockets of crooks. And ADI looks to be one of the biggest crooks in the history of California. According to the receiver's report, they did $650 million in fraudulent transactions since 2001. They ran the company on Quicken, which, if you're familiar with software, you know was a glorified check register. They had no general ledger. They did not do bank reconciliations on over 100 accounts. They had no qualified controller, no qualified CFO. And this fraud went on undetected for almost 10 years. It's kind of like the Bernie Madoff thing. You have to ask yourself, how come nobody figured out what was going on? It wasn't just Glendale that didn't figure out what was going on, although I wish we had. The outside auditors didn't know. The cities of Los Angeles, Long Beach, Anaheim, Fresno, Sacramento, San Diego, all other ADI customers, so you can't just say, well, Glendale didn't detect it. Nobody detected it until the divorce and the receivership. Does Mr. Caruso run his company on Quicken? Do we know? Just a little aside there. I want to tell you a little story about something that happened to me one day about 25 years ago when I was working at JPL, and in fact, Mr. Hoffman may even remember this. Two gentlemen in suits entered the building. They were FBI agents. They went into the office across the hall. They came out a few minutes later with another guy in handcuffs. They took him away, and we never saw him again. Turns out that the guy they took away had some computers and test equipment in his garage that were stolen from JPL. They were U.S. government property. So I know what happens to people who steal from the U.S. government. The FBI comes by and arrests them. ADI stole hundreds of millions of dollars from the U.S. government. You can bet your bottom dollar that the FBI is going to arrest everyone they can who is complicit in this theft of our money. The FBI is qualified to make these investigations and determine whether or not criminal charges are appropriate. The LA Times and the Glendale News Press are not qualified to do that, so I will take whatever they say with a grain of salt. The organization known as Vanguardians is most certainly not qualified to do that, and I take whatever they say with several boxcars of salt, because I know for a fact they are not credible, and I would like to tell you why I know that. In the fall of 2009, 7 issues of the Vanguard Weekly News, and I have them here if anyone would like to see them, carried a new feature called Text Message Intercepts on a Tuesday, publishing what were claimed to be intercepted texts or emails sent or received in this council chamber during council meetings. The first of these was published October 25th, 2009, and it says, "New technology is great. It allows the monitoring of texting on BlackBerries, iPhones, and other devices. It makes a reporter's job so much easier and a voter better informed as to who is selling him or her short." And then there's a series of these purported text messages. In the next issue, a letter is received asking, "I was interested in the text message intercepts. How did you get them?" To which the editor replies, "It's a trade secret." So we have week after week of these supposed text messages, and then on November 29th, the editor says, "This section is being expanded. Messages will be monitored on a daily basis," which is kind of funny because December 6th, the next issue, is the very last instance of this particular item showing up in Vanguardians. And I'm sure the reason it stopped showing up is that Mr. Allen realizes the quandary he's in. Interception of private communications is highly illegal under both federal and state law. And so there's only 2 possibilities here. These are either genuine, and I'm summing up right now, these are either genuine communications he printed, or they're complete fiction and he made it up. That means there's only 2 possibilities. Mr. Allen is either a multiple felon or he's a liar. Take your pick, felon or liar. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. I don't have any other cards. I will close oral communications.
That was a good one, Dad.
Let me start with the easier comments. Mr. Yemenian, you have contacted the council.
Yes.
We have received your emails requesting a resolution urging the state compensation fund to remain, and I've spoken to the city manager, and we're going to be drafting something hopefully for next week, and have to put on the agenda, or as soon as possible.
As soon as possible.
We'll be dealing with that. So hopefully that will express to the company the urgency with which we like all their employees to remain in Glendale.
I have no comments.
Mr. Starbird.
Mr. Mayor, I'm more than willing to defer to council members, but I can't help but ask your indulgence to make some comments. And I recognize here that I run the risk of going against the adage of never picking a fight with somebody who buys their ink by the barrel. In this case, probably by the tanker load. And I think that my 40 years in local government, city manager of 3 different cities, all in Los Angeles County, will reflect a record of having tremendous respect for the role of the media. Completely agree with Mr. Zavos about their importance in a free society. But I also have come to believe that with that responsibility comes an equal responsibility of reporting factual, balanced news. We've heard here this evening from Margaret Hammond that she learned, or she said we learned, why affordable housing has become so costly. The implication being because of political contributions and influence driving up the cost of housing. In my conversations with the local press as well as the LA Times, and extensive conversations, frankly, I pointed out what I view as the reason for the increase in affordable housing costs, which you will find as a topic among the major housing agencies in the state of California. I've personally been part of a task force meeting with the staff of the state tax allocation committee to talk about their policies and its impact on the cost of affordable housing in California. Policies like the tiebreaker round require a much greater allocation of local resources in order to qualify for 9% tax credits. And when I made that comment to the LA Times, and I realized it wasn't getting in the press, and I inquired as to why, I was told because the editors were not going to allow the LA Times to cover any of the TCAC issue. It was too complicated and would take up too much space. So we didn't actually learn why affordable housing is increasing in cost in Southern California. I was asked then, why would council members have an interest in approving an ADI project if not for campaign contributions? And I said, well, let me give you a very good one. If you're familiar with Glendale, you know that whenever 3 or more people gather, we talk about 2 things, either traffic or affordable housing. I said, if you know our population, you know we have a lot of people who need, clamor for, come to council meetings and ask for council's assistance in providing affordable housing. We have a list of people waiting for Section 8 housing that is over 6,000 people long, and those people will likely never get their needs met here in Glendale. And I said, as a result, you have a city council that has, in the time that we have worked with ADI, we have worked with Tom Safran and Associates, Habitat for Humanity, United Cerebral Palsy, Salvation Army, Heritage Housing, Southern California Presbyterian Homes, and others to meet our obligation and meet the needs for providing affordable housing to the best of our ability in Glendale. And I pointed out that ADI has been one of the most successful firms in the state of California at receiving 9% tax credits, which is the blood of affordable housing development in California. You aren't able to fund it if you can't get 9% tax credits from the state. And they have been the most successful firm at receiving 9% tax credit approval for the past decade in California. That's why they've been able to build $650 million of affordable housing in California. In that time, ADI has produced more family affordable housing units in Glendale than all of the other affordable housing developers we have worked with combined. And they've done it in about an 8-year time frame. So I said, if you want to see the council members' motivation for actually putting a lot of pressure on staff to produce affordable housing, that is the incentive. It's not campaign contributions. Did that get in the press? No, I'm afraid that it didn't. We have heard about shoddy construction time and time again. When we learned here in Glendale from the receiver that there was some sense on his part that the housing built by ADI was unsafe, and he didn't point out in Glendale or Anaheim or LA or Fresno, he said unsafe, I immediately dispatched Stuart Tom and his staff to go re-inspect all of those units. And they came back with a report that there is no unsafe housing. And in fact, in a subsequent meeting with one of the firms who provides the financing for these projects, they too had toured the projects in Glendale, and they said they were some of the best that they have seen, of the ones that they have toured. In fact, they were very pleased with the construction that had gone on here. Now, that was done before the LA Times article broke, and that comment has been made time and time again to the LA Times and the news press. But what do we hear? We still hear shoddy construction, implication being, as Margaret points out, somebody here in Glendale wasn't doing their job. Now, I can't speak to the other 50-plus projects across the state of California that ADI has constructed. I don't know what those are. I know 35 of them are in the city of Los Angeles. Only 4 of them are here in Glendale. And we do manage our projects well, and we know they've been safely constructed. They're not shoddy. On the matter of thanking the media for bringing this matter to their attention, in other words, breaking the news on ADI, before the LA Times, the news press, ever began to investigate the matter of ADI, Scott Howard and I sent letters to every one of the investigatory agencies at the federal and state level asking them to please commence investigations into the matter of ADI and offering the City of Glendale's complete support in any way possible in those investigations.
I didn't read that. Was that in the?
No, that also was not in the LA Times report. I personally met with the local reporter because I have always had a policy of complete openness with the press, my availability and my staff's availability to the press. And we, frankly, told them of what we had learned about the unfolding issue with ADI.
Does that mean you get a Pulitzer Prize if it's...
No, I don't get a Pulitzer Prize. Lastly, I want to say that one of my fears is that this debate will drive out the ability for us to look at this and to learn from this experience. As was pointed out by one of the speakers, the City of Glendale is among some very capable agencies, all of whom have worked with ADI, all of whom have very capable staff and consultants. If anybody in this city or on this city council had any idea that the kind of alleged fraud that was committed by ADI was going on, nobody would have allowed that to happen. And frankly, I can't believe that my counterparts in cities like Anaheim and the city of LA would have sat still with that either. You can only prevent so much. I think we have opportunities to take steps here to put into place procedures that will hopefully prevent the next ADI from happening, but not at the divisiveness and the level of rhetoric that's going on here continues to persist, because that's not going to allow us to move forward in a productive and positive fashion to establish procedures to ensure that the ADIs cannot happen again in Glendale. With that, Mr. Howard continues to tell me I have taken way too much time, and I apologize and thank you for your indulgence.
You don't need to apologize.
Thank you. Mr. Starbird, there's so much that I would like to say, and as mayor of the city, I feel that oftentimes it is my obligation to set the record straight, to remind the public of the truth, to clear the air and to defend not just council but city staff and the entire city. My problem is that I'm afraid that my words, when spoken, will be placed either out of context, twisted, or placed between innuendo and innuendo. I'm hoping that there are other media outlets out there that are able to report on this in a full and complete manner. And I may have said too much already. To be quite honest, I think it's a problem when the press twists words to the extent that your public officials are intimidated and fearful that their remarks will be placed out of context, such as the last few articles by the Times and the news press. So I'm going to refrain from making any further comment until I can find the appropriate vehicle with which to do so. Mr. Draymond.
Two comments. Just a small point. It's not really about ADI on this one, or the article, or any of the comments here tonight, except for one. One of the speakers was on a roll earlier, and it's something that he repeats here often about how he perceives the city council ganged up on Mr. Yusefian, and he always throws in, we kicked him off of all of our boards and commissions. And I take exception to that, Mr. Mayor, because it's a perfect example of the continued rewriting of history. Mr. Yusefian quit. He quit. Q-U-I-T. Quit. He quit. He quit all the boards and commissions he was serving on because he said we needed Febreze in here. He quit, and he allowed his 4 colleagues to have to pick up all of the slack from all of the work that he was supposed to do but didn't want to do anymore. He quit. No one removed him from any board or any commission. Somehow, when he later wanted to serve on an airport commission, he got a vote. He got the vote to do so. Anyway, all I'm saying is let's just not rewrite the history there. Another small point. Some speaker in this room had a copy of that email from Mr. Hoffman. I don't remember who it was, but they were holding it up at the podium. I think it was Mr. Morgan, but I'm not sure. Somebody had a copy of that email. I want to know if somebody can raise their hand and provide that for me. That is you. Can I ask you, is that the full email from Mr. Hoffman? Would you please can you come to the microphone, please? And I hope Professor Zavos has his ear bones on and open
Do you want me to read the whole thing?
No, I just want you to read the first two paragraphs.
Okay.
That'll be enough for me.
To all GHCC member association presidents and delegates, that would also be me, as for the Montrose Verdugo's Bar Heights Homeowners Association. I received a call today from Melanie Hicken of the Glendale News Press soliciting my opinion of the articles on the front page of today's Los Angeles Times titled, "Builder Got Funds Despite Concerns." This is a very revealing article on the ADI scandal, and we have heard about over the past few weeks. Particularly, Melanie, my opinion on the article as the president of the GHCC, I told her that I would send a request to all of you to inform Melanie and myself of your opinions and if you believe that the LA Times and the news press should be conducting this kind of investigative reporting. There was also a condensed article on the front page of today's news press written by Melanie and David Zandisser. My opinion to her was that I felt it was very important for the residents of Glendale to be informed of potential corruption involving our elected officials and the city staff.
Thanks, Michael. My comment is this, Mr. Mayor, and Melanie, you can quote me. You don't call me anymore, but you can quote me on this one. There is one thing about a free press, but as someone pointed out, it comes with responsibility. And I have never heard of a reporter for a newspaper, whether our local paper of record or the big brother down the street, the LA Times, of course in this case they're one and the same, contacting the president of a homeowners association in this city and asking him to contact the membership, asking them to come here and comment on their own article. Now, I also understand, to be fair, that Melanie was copied on that email from Mr. Hoffman and that she did respond, and that her response was, no, that is not what I said. What I said was, is anyone coming down from the group to comment? I'm sorry, I don't buy that either. That is an attempt to solicit a news story. It is an attempt to involve the newspaper actively in the unfolding of the news itself rather than reporting the news itself. You've overstepped into the realm of becoming a participant in the story, not the reporter of the story. That bothers me, and it's bothered a lot of people in the community. I've known you a while since you've come to this paper. I have always highly respected you. I'm sure there is an explanation, but you owe somebody an explanation, or the people that ask you to make that call owe an explanation. And if you didn't say any of that, then Mr. Hoffman also has an explanation. So one or the other, there's something incomplete about this story. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Starbury.
Mr. Mayor, one last item, and it relates to the comments about the consent calendar, consent items. I'll just point out that all of the same information is provided to you and the public on consent matters that is provided to items that are on the action calendar, and that any individual in the audience or any of you can request that matters be pulled from the consent calendar. They are the more routine matters, such as award of bids. All the same information is provided, however.
Just like tonight.
Just like this evening.
Thank you. Mr. Weaver, is there any new business?
Yes. I'd like to move that the...
Mr. Mayor, if I can.
Mr. Starr, we'd like to introduce the item.
If you don't mind, just a couple of prefatory comments.
yes, say something nice.
I'm sorry. For those who have followed our efforts, mine in particular, over the last several months to consolidate the departments of community planning and community redevelopment and housing, the ordinance creating that department and the director position to oversee it is now effective. I think, Mr. Howard, about 2 days ago, 3 days ago? 2 days, that ordinance became effective. It's now my pleasure to ask the City Council's approval of my appointment of Hassan Aghani as the Director of Community Development. Hassan has an undergraduate degree in anthropology, I was interested to find out. I probably knew that before, but had forgotten. And a master's degree in urban planning from that other school on the west side.
Oh, you've got to be kidding. Here, you can have this motion back.
Hassan came to Glendale over 6 years ago as Assistant Director of Planning. Thank you, Elaine. And a little over a year ago, headed up the expanded Department of Community Planning. I'm not sure how many years he was assistant before Elaine retired and I appointed him director. 4 years? Thank you, Elaine. I have tapped Mr. Agani to head up the new Consolidated Department of Community Development, due in large part to several things. His strong planning skills. He is one of the finest urban planners I have ever met, and I have met and worked with a lot of them in some very large, sophisticated agencies, and he brings a skill in urban planning that is unrivaled in the state. He has a tremendous ability to forge a consensus around shared visions for moving the community forward. He is a talented manager and has a tremendous skill for nurturing, supporting his staff, and we've seen that the first time when he took over we called it the reformulated Department of Community Planning, and frankly, I've begun to witness it already in the work that he's done in beginning to lead this new Department of Community Development. I think Glendale is fortunate to have somebody who can step into this position in the way Hassan can, and it is my pleasure to have recommended to you and asked for your approval of Hassan's appointment.
So it was with great honor and respect able to move that the council, acting pursuant to Glendale Charter Article 4, Section 4, Article 24, Section 5.1 or 5, parens 2, and Government Code Section 54957.1, parens A, parens 5, hereby approves the selection by the city manager of Hassan Hagani as the Director of Community Development for the City of Glendale. Pursuant to Charter Article 24, Section 10, the Civil Service Commission shall certify the appointment to the Director of Administrative Services, Human Resources.
Second.
We're very happy, Hassan, to have you on board in this hire.
Better take a vote first.
Well, we will, but I'll give everyone a chance to make a comment. Very happy. I know I've worked with you for, I think since you initially came on, we were doing some San Fernando Road corridor zoning issues, and you've been great. We're very happy to see your progress, and I think Mr. Starbird does not overstate his feelings when he says that you are truly one of the best urban planners around. Mr. Quintero.
Well, I agree. I'm very happy. Well, number one, I guess I'm happy that the consolidations are taking place. I think it's going to lead to a much more efficient delivery of city services. You're the right person to head the department, and I'm looking forward to working with you. Congratulations.
Ms. Friedman.
Well, if I could vote yes more than once, I would. I have known Hassan for a while because before being elected to council, Mr. Mohill may not have noticed, but I was a design review commissioner for 5 years, and I worked with him very closely during that time and found him to be a real driving force, along with Elaine Wilkerson, who was the planning director at the time, with pushing the city in an extremely progressive direction and a direction that really answered a lot of the homeowners' concerns about what was happening to their neighborhoods, as well as allowing the good kind of growth in our downtown area. And now that he's going to be overseeing economic growth and lots of other important issues in the city, as well as overseeing his urban design studio, which he put together, I think that we're going to continue to see the Glendale Planning Department winning awards and being the envy of all of the cities that surround us. So I'm very happy to vote on this as many times as I can.
Just once. Mr. Draymond.
Well, I'm certainly going to vote yes, and I'm thrilled to do so, but you all ought to take a gander over at this gentleman sitting on the end of the dais. Because a lot of the things that you all enjoy in your day-to-day flow from his creativity, his department. You don't necessarily realize that because planning is one of those departments, so you think of the director of planning, what exactly do they do and how does that relate to me? When I was elected in 2007, I said I had some goals that you all sent me here with, and one of them was to take the residential design review process, put it up on a hoist, tear the guts out of it, and redo it in a way that would stop some of the mansionization that was the big topic in 2007. When we talk about issues of historic districting in our city, and we talk about issues more currently, like the creative corridor, a vision for our San Fernando Road corridor, or our new art and entertainment district. All of these things started here. I got here as an elected official, newly minted, and said, okay, I've promised I'm going to do this. My colleagues are willing. How the heck do we do it? Well, it started in his office, saying, Hassan, how do we get there? How do we preserve the traditions and character and history of our traditional residential neighborhoods, protect the stability of that, but also encourage the vital kind of economic development that any city requires, but particularly Glendale? All of that flowed from his advice and his wisdom, not just as to how to physically do it, but how to move it along. So Hassan, we owe you a lot in this city, and not just the things we've done, but the things that are in the fire and on the boards and ready to move forward and continue to move Glendale forward. As the city, everybody is now starting to ask, how are they doing this in this economy? So congratulations to you. I hope we're not overburdening you, but thank you very much for your hard work and all of the work you do on behalf of the citizens of Glendale.
And as for me, Hassan, I think back 14 years when I came here, and it was very frustrating and sometimes trying to work with the planning department. I mean, it's been a total renaissance with you there. I know when we're talking about this and hearing rumors about you, I pleaded with you more than once, you've got to stay in Glendale because you're too good to lose. And for the public to know out there, the City of Long Beach wanted him, the City of LA wanted him. He's here in Glendale. And if those two cities bigger than us wanted him, what does that say about the guy? Nobody should, I was going to say nobody should question you, but probably next week you'll say something we'll disagree. So we have the respect for you, but we'll reserve the right to not necessarily accept everything you say. And I'm so happy. I think Mr. Starbird has a tremendous executive staff in place. I've watched the changes over the years. I think everyone has been replaced during my tenure on council here. You're the latest, and I'm just so grateful that you did decide to stay here. With that, is there a second on?
We had a second.
Got a motion.
We'll call for roll.
Council members Draymond,
Absolutely, yes.
Friedman,
Yes?
Quintero,
Yes.
Weaver,
Okay,
which is also yes.
that's a yes.
Mayor Najarian.
Yes, Mr. Starbird.
Mr. Mayor, thank you. I don't want to close. I do want to again thank Elaine Wilkerson, who I've viewed as a change agent director here in Glendale that helped transition us from the old days to the new days, and because of her reputation and talent, she attracted somebody of the quality of Hassan Haghani. But I don't want to close out this topic without recognizing that part of this consolidation has been the merging of community redevelopment and housing into this new department. And one of Hassan's key partners that's going to be working with him and has been working with him is Phil Lanzafame, who for the past number of years has done a tremendous job in leading the redevelopment and housing department here in the city. He and his staff have worked very hard. They are tremendous implementers. This move, as I noticed some time ago, was because, one, I strongly believe that the challenges that we face and the opportunities that we have before us can best be met by having someone to help forge a vision and build a consensus around it as to where the community should be going and provide you with that kind of support. I think Hassan is clearly the talented person to do that job. At the same time, it takes talented people to implement that vision, and we're fortunate to have people like Phil Lanzafame and his staff who will be part of the Community Development Department to continue to provide that kind of support, because it takes implementation and skills at implementing in order to implement a vision. So with that, I think we're very fortunate to have in a combined department those talents. With that, Hassan, congratulations.
How many years are you going to work here? Oh, 5, 10, 50, how many years you got to go to retirement? Oh, I like that.
Mr. Mayor, just before we leave, Mr. Yemenian had contacted us, and he was here, and he has waited to the end. Is there somebody from our staff who can meet with him on this issue of state fund? We've taken, if it is something the council wants to do to send...
Yeah.
Okay, so it is coming back. Thank you. I saw him sitting here. I didn't know if he got his answer, so...
Oh, he's enjoying himself.
And we will be adjourning tonight's meeting in the memory of
Thomas Wagner.
Second.